It requires a little bit of relearning and, dare I say, maybe even switching to Chromium.
I'm not switching to Chromium for nobody.
But you don't have to use the closed source parts or the APIs. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I'm not switching to Chromium for nobody.
Not even me.
But we're not nobody.
Right. I'm somebody, Moss. And I'm somebody that cares about you.
That's so sweet, Bill. And you
I
know
want
I
you to
love you dearly.
succeed. Help us help you, Moss.
I'm not using Chromium.
Why not?
You can't make me!
Save it for the show.
All right.
You can tell us why not during the Chromium section.
I think I'm gonna just
Because it was written as proprietary, and don't know if it's all been taken out yet.
Okay.
No.
Show.
Yeah, do that in the show.
Oh yeah. Hang on a minute. I'm still not quite ready. I want to make sure everything is ship shape in Bristol fashion. Chaps.
What the hell did you say? At least you picked an appropriate accent.
Yeah.
Well, he missed it. But he
Missed it, yeah.
Well, thank God for small mercies, eh?
I wouldn't be alive. All right. Okay. Now, do I even have Audacity installed?
Oh God, that reminds me when you said about you wouldn't still be alive. That reminds me of when my wife told me that she was pregnant with our second one, and the first words that came out of my mouth were "how," and then and then about a millisecond later, well, of course I know how. Anyway, the question I was really asking was, I thought we had taken protection, but obviously we hadn't. But it was just, my wife still remembers it. She still reminds me about it. The boy's 16 now.
Protection is not perfect.
No.
They tell you. They tell you it's like what 96% effective, which means it's 4% ineffective.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I mean, okay, I'm a married man, so that's not really going to be an issue for me. But for other people who have said slightly more active lives, put it that way, that means out of 100, 4 times you'd be unlucky.
Okay, are we ready yet?
I think so.
All right. Anyway,
Oh wait, that's wrong.
are we mic testing now?
I'm so drugged up right now that I might be. We might be streaming over to Three Fat Truckers. I don't know. But let's soldier on nonetheless.
All right, ready for our 3, 2, 1s?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Majid?
Yes, I am.
3, 2, 1, record. Okay, that's good enough for Tony. Too bad Tony's not editing these days, but that's good enough for Tony. All right. 3, 2, 1, 0.
I gotta say, I'm kind of impressed. I was expecting to see all kinds of waveform here, but since I turned back the gain, it seems like it got rid of a lot of that. I don't know. We'll see.
All right, we ready to go?
We are.
Go where?
Get this show on the road.
That depends on who you ask.
I'm asking you.
Ooh. We get back with you on that. Poor Moss.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 416. This is episode 416.5, recorded on Sunday, July 9th, 2023. Getting an early start, I'm Moss.
Playing at being a mechanic again, I'm Joe.
Bound for Texas, I'm Bill.
Trying to relax. I'm Majid.
First up in the news, Mint Monthly News, Steam Deck exceeds 10,000 games, Red Hat fights public opinion, new Libre boot is out, Google whines about their new AI search, Peppermint OS upgrades to Bookworm, a new Chaos, First Amendment fails at Supremes, and Solus 4 is released. In security and privacy, Stackrot is here, and so is Proton Pass. Then in our wanderings, Moss makes money, Joe goes 3D, Bill mics up, and Majid thumbs his nose at inflation. In our innards section, we talk browsers, and finally the feedback and a couple of suggestions. So in the news, Mint Monthly News from the Linux Mint blog. Many thanks to all the people who were testing and finding bugs in the beta. So far, they gathered 60 bug reports. Many issues were fixed already thanks to feedback. On July 9th, the final release candidate moved into testing. That's all.
Steam Deck hits over 10,000. Big milestone has just been hit for Steam Deck, as there's now over 10,000 titles rated to be either verified or playable. This comes nearly 2 months after it hit 9,000. The current lists are verified 3,472, playable 6,533, unsupported 3,110. We can see this thanks to the SteamDB list. This includes titles that are unlisted on the Steam store but still downloadable for people who own the games, so it's the best list to use. Quite amazing to see such progress for a device that has only been out for a little over a year. A lot of this is thanks to Valve's work with Proton, since that enables a ridiculously huge amount of Windows games to be playable on Steam Deck and desktop Linux. Proton is closing in on its 5-year anniversary soon too, not to discount those developers fully supporting native Linux builds too, as it all adds up to the experience. To be fully Steam Deck verified, this is what developers need to be aware of. Input. The title should have full controller support, use appropriate controller input icons, and automatically bring up the on-screen keyboard when needed. Display. The game should support the default resolution of Steam Deck, 1280 by 800 or 1280 by 720. Have good default settings, and text should be legible. Seamless. The title shouldn't display any compatibility warnings, and if there's a launcher, it should be navigable with a controller. System support. If running through Proton, the game and all its middleware should be supported by Proton. This includes anti-cheat support. Some of the interesting games that recently gained a playable or verified status include playable Everdream Valley, verified Kingdom 80s, playable Park Beyond, verified Soul Survivors, verified Tiny Life, verified The Last of Us. Now, this is actually really good for Linux in general, even if a lot of it is playing over Proton. I mean, it really just adds and makes it so that, you can do more with Linux. What do you guys think?
Okay, Red Hat tried to address criticism over the new source code restrictions from Phoronix. Upsetting many in the open source community was Red Hat's announcement last week that they would begin limiting access to the Red Hat Enterprise Linux sources
I don't hear anything.
by putting them behind the Red Hat customer portal, and publicly would be limited to the CentOS stream sources. In turn, this causes problems for most cost derivatives like Alma Linux moving forward.
So Moss is talking at the minute.
There's Bill.
Yeah, Joe dropped out.
I can't hear Moss either.
Yeah.
You can't hear me at all?
I can hear you.
There you are.
Oh, okay.
And you're gone again.
I'm gone again?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I heard him.
No, not for
way.
me, but I can see on the YouTube that it's bouncing in and out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, but you did bounce out for a second. You did bounce out for a sec.
Yeah, and he's still not back.
Well, I was watching the YouTube channel, and it was going down to like one or two of y'all, and
yeah, I noticed that as well. I thought it was me though.
I also saw it happening on Video Ninja, and there another dropout on YouTube.
And Bill is frozen.
No, I'm trying to look and see if I can fix some of this. So first you have to understand that the reason you might see something one place and not the other is because there's two things going on at the same time right here. You've got an RTMP stream going back and forth from each other, and then there's a separate RTMP stream that goes to the OBS studio stream. So you can drop out of one and stay in the other. And that's why everybody gets confused when one person can still be seen here, but they drop out of the stream, if that makes sense to everybody. I can hear you, but you are not in the...
Yeah.
So, Joe, can you hear Moss?
Oh, I see. It's because Moss refuses to use Chromium. Okay, there it is.
Okay.
Okay. Let me refresh it again, and then I'll have to... This time I'm just going to stop it.
This will be fun to audio edit.
It will, won't it?
Bill?
Mm-hmm.
Majid.
No, it's not going to be me. I couldn't audio edit my own. I couldn't audio edit my farts. Forget about the podcast.
Bill's going to end up asking me to do it. Watch.
Oh, Bill's back. Oh, William.
We might want to do another 3210.
All right, I got everybody up on the screen here.
Mm-hmm.
But you are not in the OBS.
It's just me and Majid on the YouTubes.
I need you to stop whatever browser you're using, Moss, and restart said browser and re-sign into the video room, if you please.
After you install Chromium.
After you install Chromium. Or Edge. Or
Did not say
Vivaldi.
Edge.
Or Opera.
Or Opera.
Or Chrome. Or Chrome.
Or Google Chrome.
Full on Google Chrome.
And if you're on Arch, Moss, it's yay, tac S, uppercase S, Google Chrome. This all
is the
works.
thing, isn't it? Google Chrome has just become like the Internet Explorer of the age, isn't it? People just make their websites for Chrome.
All of these problems we have is all because of trying to shoehorn this stuff into Firefox. It's unfortunate. After I got all the guys on all the other shows onto Chromium, or something made out of Chromium, all the problems went away.
So, I mean...
It is what it is.
And this is what's so annoying about Mozilla, isn't it? In that if they just bloody paid some bloody attention to their browser, their main thing, rather than farting about like they have over the years with phones and VPNs and this, that, and the other.
The reason they've done that is because they're having trouble finding funding. That isn't, just Google paying them to have Google.com as their search engine.
I mean, that, and the simple fact is most of these developers are testing their software on Chromium, because that's the largest number of use cases.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it is the Internet Explorer of our time.
It's unfortunate, but there you go.
The Netscape Navigator of our time.
I feel like Moss is installing Chromium.
Nah.
I think he is. It's taken way too long.
I mean, if he has, then that really would be very interesting.
Opera.
No, he's not going to install Opera.
No way.
He's not installing Opera. For God's sake, even I got rid of Opera once I started looking into the security stuff.
He'll jump off of a bank building before he installs Opera.
Hey, maybe he's going on to GNOME Web.
That won't work any better than this.
No, it won't. It'll be worse.
Yeah, it would probably be worse. I want those browsers to be good too, though. I really do, because if Firefox turns into a big old fartsicle, then
There's a
I remember
genuine
back in
question.
the day when it used to be the thing to like switch back and forth between Chrome and Firefox because like Chrome would just start eating all of your RAM, and so then you
Yeah.
switch to Firefox for a while, and then something would happen to Firefox, and you'd switch back to Chrome because it had gotten better again.
I mean, I do that actually still now. But the question I was going to ask is, and this might sound stupid, is on Android, how different are the browsers? Are they all using their proper engines, or is it like an Apple style
Um,
situation where
Bill's
it,
frozen. I don't see anyone else.
Don't hear you yet, Moss. Uh-oh.
Oh
you know,
boy.
There you go.
like on iOS where you've got Safari, and if you haven't got Safari, you still got Safari because it's Safari, Safari with another web coating on it, but it's still
Now that we're all on, let's save that for the innards.
Well,
okay.
we're not all on though is the problem.
You're here, Moss, but
You're here.
you're not on the stream.
Oh. Well, you're not in the doggone stream, and I don't know what the hell is going on here. That doesn't make any damn sense.
There
Let me
you
re.
are.
Is he?
He's in the stream now.
I don't see him in front of me.
Oh, now he's gone again. He was on YouTube for like 30 seconds almost.
Oh yeah, and then it went away, and I don't know why.
Are you sure you don't want to use Chromium, Moss?
Might
Oh,
as
don't
well.
pretend like it's the
Oh, whoa,
first
whoa.
time.
Here we go.
It would be for me.
I have no idea why all of a sudden he just showed up and I did nothing.
I don't do updates before a show.
Oh, he's still not on the YouTube yet.
Yeah, he is. He is now. You're just kind of in a.
It lagged, yeah.
Ooh, I've got no control over your audio settings.
Who's audio?
Moss's.
All right.
So I can't stop that echo. That is no
Well,
doubt.
I only have 10 minutes worth of audio on my Audacity so far, and now I've got to start a new one.
Yeah, I'm going to too, but let me make sure. Oh, I can't get anybody's
Mine's so
audio
good.
settings. That's just lovely. I'm going to restart mine.
Lovely. This is epic.
Yeah.
Mid-show, he restarts. Yay, no more stream.
It's nice that it's for once it's not my audio problems. I'm the noob here.
I'm just not believing this.
Yeah,
stuff.
well, I've been doing.
And we've never had this much of a problem before mid-show.
Hey. Okay,
feel like
I've
that's
got
all
my
directed
Audacity
towards
ready
me.
to go again. For
It was directed towards you, Bill.
I feel
Yeah.
like that
Glad you could
was.
see that.
It's not passive aggressive. It's just aggressive.
are we ready to go again?
Let's keep it simple, huh, Majid?
Yeah, damn right.
How's the stream look?
Well, I'm still getting an echo from. Let me see. Bring up your screen for video real quick, Moss. That way the echo cancellation can. There we go.
Okay.
And that fixes it. It seems like none of the things take work unless you actually have it open in front of you.
Huh. Am I here?
Yes. And
Yes.
you sound good.
Okay, well, we got to do another 3210.
Start all over again.
Not
No.
starting over, just picking up.
Okay.
Let's make it clear, though, for the sake of my editing, where we're starting at. That way I can hear that. and
We
know
are
what to do.
starting at me starting to read the article.
Wait till we start recording.
About 16 minutes.
Go ahead, Moss.
Yeah.
That's funny. I only had 10 minutes on my Audacity.
Well, we've been sitting here for about like 5, so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mine's on 16 minutes because I haven't switched it off.
Find where I left off here. We're not on the Google article. No,
we're on the Red Hat.
article. I got it. Okay, now I got to. I'm doing another 3210 from the Red Hat article. 3, 2, 1, 0.
0.
Close enough. All right. Red Hat tried to address criticism over their new source code restrictions from Phoronix. Upsetting many in the open source community was now my teeth don't work. Upsetting many in the open source community was Red Hat's announcement last week that they would begin limiting access to the Red Hat Enterprise Linux sources by putting them behind the Red Hat customer portal, and publicly would be limited to the CentOS stream sources. In turn, this causes problems for free of cost derivatives like Alma Linux moving forward. Red Hat today issued another blog post trying to address some of the criticism. Red Hat's blog today featured a post by Mike McGrath, the VP of Core Platforms Engineering at Red Hat. In the post, he talks up Red Hat's commitment to open source. Some of the key takeaways include, and these are all quotes, "Despite what's currently being said about Red Hat, we make our hard work readily accessible to non-customers. Red Hat uses and will always use an open source development model. When we find a bug or write a feature, we contribute our code upstream. This benefits everyone in the community, not just Red Hat and our customers." Another quote, "We will always send our code upstream and abide by the open source licenses our products use, which includes the GPL. When I say we abide by the various open source licenses that apply to our code, I mean it." And another quote, "I feel that much of the anger from our recent decision around the downstream sources comes from either those who do not want to pay for the time, effort, and resources going into RHEL, or those who want to repackage it for their own profit. This demand for RHEL code is disingenuous." And a final quote, "Simply rebuilding code without adding value or changing it in any way represents a real threat to open source companies everywhere. This is a real threat to open source, and one that has the potential to revert open source back into a hobbyist and hackers-only activity." And you can read the post in full on Red Hat's blog with a link in the show notes.
So,
Okay, that's just rubbish, isn't it?
well,
Let's be honest.
okay, at first
bit,
you
yeah.
think that, but we talked about this on OTC last week, and the way it was working was Red Hat was literally unbranding everything and then just providing an easy method to completely copy bug for bug every little bit of the Red Hat distribution. And that was taking resources away from their core project, from providing service to their paying customers and all that. And on the surface of it, you think, well, yeah, it's GPL software, but technically, they are not required to provide source code to anything or anybody that doesn't use the binary.
Well,
Now,
but what I've heard is not that Alma Linux and Rocky Linux and all these others have to strip the RHEL stuff out themselves. It's not that RHEL is stripping it out and handing it to them.
well, they were though. They were basically providing a stripped out repository where all of the branding was taken out, and they could just rebuild with their own branding. And I mean that is a non-0% level of work to be put into it.
I would agree with that.
Now, if let's say, okay, so one way moving forward is for them to start a developer account, or whatever kind of account that would be appropriate for them to get access to the RHEL source code, and then for them to take it. Now, if RHEL then goes and makes it difficult for these companies beyond that, then you can say, well, it's no longer a case where they're no longer going out of their way to make it easy. They're going out of their way to make it harder. Now, this is a different argument, in my opinion, because they're actively trying to put barricades in place to keep people from providing a bug-for-bug RHEL alternative. Now, I mean, this is a contentious subject right now, to be sure. But like I said, when I first heard this, I thought, well, yeah, that's rubbish, but I can't believe it didn't happen sooner, to be honest, because we started down this path when they switched over to CentOS Stream. Because and they're
started
right.
down this path when IBM bought.
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation that this sounds more like IBM type stuff than it does Red Hat. But I mean, the point is that they are a company that has to figure out ways to make money, and providing a free of charge path to all of the source code to rebuild this thing for free if they don't have to do that. From a business perspective, I can see why the bean counters would say, you know what, I don't know why we're doing this.
Well, it can
But
still be
surely they're
said that
making enough
Red
money
Hat
anyway.
is the most profitable Linux company in the
Yes,
world.
but you have to change your way of thinking from believing that this is a open source company that makes money to a company that uses open source to make money. They just happen to have a product that is based on open source tech. Now, are they still providing value? Will they continue to provide value to the open source community because of things like System D and Pulse Audio and Pipewire and all? They're even working on what is it, the color thing, the HDR color. They're working on that. They'll be the company that gives us a solution for that. So they are contributing to our ecosystem. I'm not sure that necessarily means they need to give us a clear, free of charge path to completely copy RHEL, the product that they're making money on, into something that indeed Rocky and Alma can make money on.
So, from what you're saying, if
Well, and
somebody still
Adobe
wanted,
and
sorry,
go ahead.
yeah, sorry. So, so if I understand correctly, anybody can still get access to all of Red Hat's code
Yeah.
and still make a clone, if you wanted to call it that. Yeah. It's just that they'd have to pay them a developer account to have access to all that.
It's not clear whether Red Hat's going to allow somebody to just simply do that. I think
But then that's where that's where the whole concept of open source thing is a problem, isn't it?
well,
Because
you
because
still,
because it's one thing. I understand exactly what your point is about saying that. Look, why a company doesn't need to make it easy for you to be able to use their source code. I understand that, right? But now what's also being said is, well, if you did want to, it's not just that you have to do the work, but you're going to have to pay them money to do it as well. And that's kind of like I exactly is. I mean, maybe they've got a good legal team on by, and they can, and this does somehow still come under the GPL, but it does leave a bad taste in the mouth, doesn't it?
so if you look at what Alma and Rocky have been saying about this since the whole thing started, you've got two completely different schools of thought going on. Where Rocky is saying, you know what, we can spin this up in an AWS container and get the universal, what do they call that? The universal base image, and then draw the source code from that, and then kill the AWS instance. And let's see if they can figure out a way to make that illegal, because you're not creating an account. You're getting that base image and then extracting from that. And then Alma's looking at it another way. Their team is saying, well, we still have access, and they cannot and will not take access away to the source code of CentOS Stream. And this is like exponentially more work, but you could, in fact, from the source code of CentOS Stream, extrapolate the versions of each package that you would need to rebuild whatever version of RHEL you were trying to clone. It's just far more work to create this thing than they were originally dealing with. I mean, originally, all they had to do was take this thing that RHEL was providing to them, like, here you go do what you want with it. And RHEL, for all the work they put into it, they get absolutely zero value from Rocky and Alma, and to a lesser extent or a greater extent, I don't know, the Oracle people. There's a company that's been quiet about this since the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, that is interesting actually. How quiet Oracle have been.
Well, they're not new at this, are they?
No,
they
no. I mean, your point about that Red Hat is not an open source company, but it's a company which happens to use an
Yeah.
open source software. I think that is very true, and I think the thing about, well, what do you expect from a company? At the end of the day, a company is there for the benefit of its shareholders, and
Yeah.
it's now owned by IBM and all that sort of stuff. So all of that means that all that's happened isn't particularly surprising I
No.
think, in one sense, the argument is why didn't it happen earlier? So, so my issue with people getting really vexed about this is that at the end of the day, this is a business company. What did you expect?
Yeah.
You know, and think but at the same time, I'm not going to say that I'm not going to defend what they've done. It's just that I'm not surprised that it's happened. Do you understand what I mean?
The things that bother me a little bit are the things like Scientific Linux and organizations like CERN that use. I know they're using Scientific Linux on their Large Hadron Collider and other scientific organizations. And that is Red Hat going to maybe provide a few more ways to access, perhaps even RHEL, at a discounted, if not free, tier for nonprofit scientific organizations, that are not necessarily bringing in enough money to pay for a full enterprise Linux package, because I know that they are depending on these things as well for their server workloads. That's the thing I care about more than anything else, because I don't know anybody that runs RHEL on a server. I've got a developer account, and I install it on a virtual machine just to play with it, and then I install CentOS Stream next to it, and there's very little difference, honestly. I feel like anybody that needs free RHEL could probably get on just fine from CentOS Stream, but then again, I'm not an expert.
And then Red Hat will change that again.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Here's a newbie kind question because again, I am a bit of a noob. What is the differences between RHEL and Fedora then? Because Fedora has a server and a workstation spin, doesn't it?
yeah, Fedora, I don't want to go so far as to say Fedora is the alpha, CentOS Stream is the beta, and then RHEL is the product. But
That's a good
They're
way of
trying
thinking
to set
about
that
that.
Well,
up. Yes.
it is and it isn't. I mean, Fedora is more specifically geared towards desktops,
yeah,
and
I mean, they
Red
do
Hat
have a
is
server though.
yeah.
Yeah, because it is a server spin.
Yeah.
It's still the focus for Fedora is still more desktop usage than say RHEL. So
But you're getting bleeding edge software in Fedora. That's where the whole testing process starts with the open source community, and then it moves on to, once it has like become what is believed fit for purpose, it goes into the CentOS Stream, and then that's made available as a free. Now, see, there's the thing about CentOS Stream. RHEL is getting value out of CentOS Stream because RHEL can test all the software that's going to go into the next version of RHEL in CentOS Stream, and in some things are like on par with RHEL.
So, are you saying that the community builds for Fedora, and then that gets taken by Red Hat and added to CentOS for testing, and then that gets then moved to Red Hat?
I mean, it's another. I'm sure it's not exactly that simple for everything, but that's kind of the way I've come to understand it. Is that it's just one layer where they've got one more place where this stuff gets tested in a place where they're getting value from it. Because before, what did they have? They had their in-house testing. They had Fedora, of course, but then they had their in-house testing, and then they had to chuck it over the wall to RHEL. And they really didn't have a place to actually test these releases in a production server environment. And CentOS Stream gives them that opportunity, that layer that wasn't there before.
Well, the whole thing is kind of disingenuous when you figure they bought CentOS and changed CentOS. And because they changed CentOS, that's why we have to have things like Alma and Rocky.
I think they bought CentOS because they knew that people were installing CentOS, and they knew that it was a bug for bug compatible operating system with RHEL. So when people see something going wrong with CentOS, they just assume that RHEL is suffering from the exact same problems, and that a company needs to be in control of that kind of narrative. You know what I mean?
But they just open it up to other companies to do the same thing.
But see, that's the way we do things in the open source world. That's not necessarily the way a company who needs to be in charge of the entire stack. See, if somebody in the enterprise space has a problem with something going on in the operating system, they need to be able to contact Red Hat and say, this is a problem I'm having, and then Red Hat needs to be able to fix it. And in order for that to be true, they need to be behind the wheel of the entire thing in order to have full access, rather than,
So you're saying they're control freaks.
Well, I mean, they've got paying customers, don't they? And they've got very expensive paying customers who expect, if they're going to pay a lot of money for this project, that if they have a problem with it, that they can communicate directly those problems and then have a real solution to it. Instead of, okay, well, yeah, that's not our project, that is such and such on GitHub, we'll go ahead and file a GitHub issue for that problem and see what happens. That's how we do it in the open source world, isn't it? And that would not work in the enterprise space.
Well, I don't think we're going to solve this here today, and since this is not Relcast, why don't we move on to the next story, Joe?
Okay, LibreBoot FOSS BIOS replacement sees new release. This is from OMG Linux. Joe Snedden writes, I'll admit that I'm as knowledgeable about boot technologies as I am BTS trivia. But, my own shortcomings aside, open source boot tech is a big deal for a lot of Linux folks. Don't worry, I don't know anything about BTS either. Which makes the latest LibreBoot release worthy of words on this blog. Anyone who, like myself, is wet behind the ears on this topic, LibreBoot is an open source BIOS UEFI replacement based on Core Boot, with an emphasis on security. LibreBoot is to Core Boot what Debian is to Linux. It makes it easier to run Core Boot on supported hardware. Unlike other boot firmware, LibreBoot is entirely free of proprietary blobs. It is free to inspect, modify, and redistribute. It also boasts solid support for booting Linux-based distros as well as OpenBSD and FreeBSD. The type of person who would use LibreBoot is the sort of person who is worried about security threats in modern UEFI firmware, especially about possible backdoors, explains project lead Lei Rowe. Up to speed? I certainly feel more aware of what LibreBoot is after writing all that, so it helps no one but myself. Job done. And that's Joe Snedden that said that, not me. What's new in the latest release? LibreBoot 2023-06-25 adds support for the HP EliteBook 2570p laptop and the HP 8300 USDT and Gigabyte GA G4 1M ES2L desktops. If this bump in hardware support seems small, there's a reason. Recent development focused on stability, auditing the build system, and fixing bugs. You can get a good idea of how fruitful that focus was by fishing through the official release notes. They are lengthy. Additionally, this is LibreBoot release provides 2 sets of ROM images for each x86 mainboard supported. One contains CPU microcode and the other excludes it. The project's website has a page detailing microcode in LibreBoot. I don't have any compatible hardware to try LibreBoot myself, but if you're interested in learning more and potentially using it, you can go check it out at the project webpage using the many links in the post. And if you're a LibreBoot user, I'd love to hear about your experiences using it. Once again, that is from the article.
And we would love to hear it too.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I don't know what you got to do to have hardware that runs that. A lot of soldering, I guess. You know how to do that, Joe?
Soldering?
No. Stop you right there. Get a machine ready to run LibreBoot. I understand.
Well, System 76 is using Core Boot, is it not?
Maybe. I don't know.
Something like that, yeah.
But it's just a matter of, picking the right laptop or picking the right motherboard, it looks like, because the Gigabyte GA G4 1M ES2L is just a motherboard. So pick the right hardware that is already supported by LibreBoot and install it.
Right.
Okay. Google admits users not quite happy with new search engine. From CNBC.com, Google users have long been able to append their search queries with the term Reddit to find helpful sources on specific topics. When thousands of Reddit forums went dark earlier this month, that tactic lost its effectiveness. Many pages in search results were suddenly inaccessible or unhelpful because moderators of some of the most popular forums turned their pages to private as part of a widespread protest of Reddit's decision to start charging developers for access to its data. It's an issue that Google executives say is at least partially resolved by a new feature called Perspectives that was unveiled Monday. The Perspectives tab, available now on mobile web and the Google app in the US, promises to surface discussion forums and videos from social media platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, and Quora. At an all-hands meeting earlier this month, Prabhakar Raghavan, Google's senior vice president in charge of research, told employees that the company was working on ways for search to display helpful resources and results without requiring users to add Reddit to their searches. Raghavan acknowledged that users had grown frustrated with the experience. Quote, many of you wonder how we have a search team that's iterating and building all this new stuff, and yet somehow users are still not quite happy, end quote, Raghavan said. Quote, we need to make users happy, end quote. Raghavan was responding to an employee comment about negative user feedback because of too many ads and irrelevant results. Quote, what can we do to improve the user experience on the core product that made Google a household name? End quote, the employee asked, according to audio of the meeting obtained by CNBC. Google's in the process of trying to revamp search to keep pace with rivals and taking advantage of the latest advances in generative artificial intelligence, which involves providing more sophisticated and conversational answers to text-based queries. At its annual developer conference in May, the company said it was experimenting with an effort called Search Generative Experience, which still isn't available to everyone, showing more in-depth results powered by generative AI. Google also launched a ChatGPT competitor called Bard earlier this year. Bard remains separate from Search and is still in experimental mode. Another employee question in the company-wide meeting asked if Google can more easily surface authentic discussion since the Reddit blackout was making it harder to find such content. CEO Sundar Pichai chimed in to say that users don't want blue links as much as they want, quote, more comprehensive answers, end quote. That's why they add the name of forum sites like Reddit to their searches, he says. H.J. Kim, Vice President of Engineering and Search, said at the meetings that users have been asking for more content from sites like Reddit. He said the Perspectives tab is one feature the company has been working on in response, but that it can do a better job. Quote, over the last couple of years, Search overall has developed these large cross-functional teams to go after this kind of content, end quote, Kim said, referring to Reddit. Quote, we could do a better job, we realize that, and over the last couple of years, we've actually developed quite a bit, end quote. Raghavan said that Google would determine what's, quote, getting the best traction, end quote. Quote, but the idea there is for these questions where there are multiple opinions, instead of appending stuff, you actually go in there and get the answer right away, and we're actually seeing good early engagement on that, end quote, Raghavan said. He added that while the company is spending a lot of time in AI, it's not the only answer to the problem. Quote, generative AI is one aspect, but it won't fully solve this issue. I want to be clear, he said. We actually have teams that are running experiments, end quote, with Perspectives as one example. Quote, we have to keep up and do a better job of addressing these new and emerging needs, end quote, he said. Laura Levin, a Google spokeswoman, told CNBC in a statement that Search, quote, satisfies the overwhelming majority of user needs, and we're always improving Search to meet the evolving needs of every one of our users, end quote. Quote, features like Perspectives filter are part of how we're making sure people continue to find the most helpful info on Google from a wide range of sources and formats, end quote, Levin said.
Interesting.
Yeah, with no comment. I was afraid I'd lost the feed again.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? That it's just interesting to see the evolution of the next stage of the evolution of Google search.
I got that. Be able to get quicker answers that are less factual than ever before.
I mean, I get the feeling that they put a lot of stock into their Google Assistant didn't really kick off, and then were blindsided by ChatGPT, and then Microsoft buying ChatGPT so quickly, hence having to start making Bard. And I mean, I was watching a video. Mr. Mobile was doing a review of the Pixel tablet, and he said one of the problems with it is Google Assistant doesn't work very well anymore. And as you know, it's supposed to be kind of like a Nest Home replacement. It docks and it can control your smart home and things like that. So you can see how, as I was saying, they're evolving. They're looking at different things, maybe concentrating on one thing rather than another. I'm sure they'll still make loads of money, right?
Not that anyone cares, but I also noticed that Microsoft just killed Cortana.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Actually, that was just long overdue, wasn't it? Really.
That's the first thing you disable when you install Windows 10.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's the first thing you never enable.
Yeah.
yeah. It's like when they say, "Oh, you can just talk to your machine." No, thank you. I'm fine.
No.
If I wanted to talk to people, I'd speak to my family, and get rubbish answers. Then I'd definitely speak to my family. Anyway,
And
moving
they
on.
needed that technology for their Master Chief anyway, so.
So, new Peppermint OS
Moving on.
is out. Yeah, so new Peppermint OS is out based on Debian 12. So this is from 9 to 5 Linux. The Peppermint OS team announced on July the 1st the general availability for download of the new ISO images based on the latest and greatest Debian 12 Bookworm operating system series. Apart from including the updated packages from Debian 12, the new Peppermint OS release comes with various improvements and refreshed artwork, including branding, a new theme for the Plymouth boot splash screen, as well as a new Maraweta themes and Tila icons. On top of that, the welcome screen and Peppermint Hub have been updated to remove or add features based on user feedback. Kumo received a simplified GUI and it now uses the Lua programming language, and the NeoFetch was adjusted to use the basic output without a logo. The Debian 12 based Peppermint OS release also comes with an updated Calamaris graphical installer so that it won't download and install packages during the installation, as it took too long for the installation to complete. Also, the Peppermint documentation was updated. Existing Peppermint OS users will be able to upgrade their current installations based on Debian GNU Linux 11 Bullseye to the new version based on Debian 12 Bookworm, using Debian's upgrade process, which involves changing the repositories to point to the Bookworm ones. Alternatively, you'll be able to use the Peppermint OS upgrade tool, which will also update the Peppermint tools. However, this tool is still in the works at the moment of writing, and there's no date set for a release. Until then, if you want to install it on your personal computers, you can download ISO images, which are available both in 64 and 32-bit from the official website, or by using direct download links on the 9to5 Linux website. Peppermint OS also offers Dev1 based ISO images that don't include systemd. Oh, I remember that. However, these are all still based on Debian 11 Bullseye, and also it will take longer for the team to rebase them on Debian 12 Bookworm. Peppermint OS aims to offer the Linux community a lightweight distribution for everyday use, featuring the XFCE 4.18 desktop environment by default. So, Peppermint OS is one of these OSs that has often been touted for use on old hardware. I actually think of it more as the original Chrome OS, in one sense, where everything is kind of light and web-based, and you only have that which you need, and you access the internet and blah blah blah.
They have moved beyond that, Majid.
No, I'm not saying that as a. I'm not saying that as a bug. I'm saying that as a feature. I think that's a good thing.
They originally had everything set up as web apps, and they don't do that anymore for the most part.
But I mean, as I said, I actually think that's a good thing. I think that's a good way, especially of keeping it light,
And they've also gone full XFCE, whereas in the past they did a hybrid between LXDE and XFCE.
I've always used it as a go-to to install like persistent on a thumb drive, on a really large, fast thumb drive. It works really well for, like, if somebody wanted to keep a distribution completely siloed off to do like all their money stuff on, Peppermint OS was a good solution for that.
Okay, I might have to try that. I do generally have a USB with a distro on if I want to use it on in that kind of way. But I generally used Ubuntu based ones. I think so. I'll try Peppermint actually. That's
Well, My problem with Peppermint Debian 11 was that it was just too pepperminty. That peppermint icon was too big for me, and it drove me batty. The new one doesn't look pepperminty at all. It uses red script on a black background, and
all of these things can be changed.
Yeah, I just watched DT doing a video of it this morning, and he thought it looked really cool, and I thought it looked kind of like they missed their mark. That's me.
Okay. In further distro news, a new version of KOS is out, which is an Arch-inspired distro with Plasma. So again, this is from 95 Linux. The KOS developers announced today the release and general availability of Chaos 2023.06 as a new ISO snapshot for this KDE-focused and Arch Linux-inspired independent Linux distribution. I'm interested why they call it Arch Linux-inspired. Anyway, maybe
they're using Pac-Man and the way Arch is put together, but they're not using the Arch repositories anymore.
Okay, all right.
Maintaining their own, just like Manjaro.
Okay, so this version of Chaos comes a little over 2 months after the 2023-04 snapshot, which celebrated the project's 10th anniversary by offering users a dedicated ISO image with the early preview of the upcoming KDE Plasma 6 desktop environment series. The new ISO release continues this tradition to offer adventurous users a new KDE Plasma 6 preview ISO image. However, once again, the devs warn users that this ISO is not installable as the Calamaris graphical installer is not yet ready for Qt6 or Plasma 6, and there are only a few apps built using that framework. However, the new version is here as a stable ISO release featuring the latest KDE Plasma 5.27.6 LTS desktop environment, which is accompanied by the latest KDE Gear 2304.2 and KDE Frameworks 5.107 open source software suites, all built against Qt 5.15.10. Included in the release is also the latest SDDM 0.20.0 display manager, which adds support for the Wayland session. The Chaos devs noted the fact that this change brings their independent distro one step closer to dropping X11. Something we've discussed before, which is it's going to happen. It's just a case of when. On top of that, the Calamaris graphical installer now comes with an updated automated partitioning system to offer the users the ability to install KOS with any of the popular Linux file systems, including ButterFS, ext4, XFS, ZFS. I'm going to say that again, ZFS, without having to perform manual partitioning. Calamaris installer in
is that anything like
KOS?
ZFS?
No, it's better.
Oh.
Yeah, it's better. And it's from the old world. So under the hood, it's powered by the latest Linux 6.3 kernel series, comes with an updated toolchain consisting of GCC 12.3.0, GNU C library 2.37, GNU bin utils 240, glib 276.3, system D 253.5, Python 3.10.12, util Linux 2.3.1, ZFS 2.1.12, GNU PG 2.4.2, libssh 1.11.0, and others. And you can download it from its official website or from 95 Linux. Since it follows the rolling release model, you only have to install it once and you'll receive updates forever. And so existing users will only need to update their installations by running the sudo pacman-syu command to break your system. Okay, sorry, they didn't put that bit in.
I love how every time you tried to say ZFS, your audio cut out.
Yeah, every time. In fact, what's the letter that comes right after Y?
Z.
I'm going to get you to say Z, and then I'm going to pull that out of the audio.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have that saved in a secret file somewhere, and I'm gonna replace every time you say Z.
So further proof, if anyone needed, that you really need to get out more, Bill.
You know what? I imagine I could drive 3 days in any direction and ask that same question, and they would say Z, and then I would say, "How do you pronounce the letter H?" Oh, you mean H?
Hetch.
Actually, that's the thing you cut down a tree with, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, actually, that's the Indian way of saying H, to be honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, Now
having fun.
we seems to be coming on to your favorite topic next.
Yeah, too bad Moss wasn't here.
Yeah, it's a bit annoying. Well, where's he gone?
I don't know. He's installing Chromium somewhere. I wonder if he knows he's gone. That's
Oh yeah, there is that as well. Yeah.
because I sent him a message on Signal. For anybody that doesn't know, we're using an open source bit of software called VDO Ninja, and like some of the other tools that we've switched to, Moss's transition to these things has been less than smooth.
One gets the feeling that another type of transition might be smoother than this.
Oh my! I'll go ahead and keep on trucking though, as we say. I put this in here because in my little world of blue collar American, shall we say, conservative people, whenever something happens where tech is being put to the fire, people just love calling me up on the phone and telling me about it because everybody knows that I'm a nerd, and I'm scorned heavily because of it. But this article was one that was brought to my attention by these lovely people in my life, and it's from Ars Technica. Judge rules White House pressured social networks to suppress free speech. And it reads, Missouri and Louisiana sued Biden that's President Biden, over attempts to limit COVID misinformation. A federal judge ordered the Biden administration to halt a wide range of communications with social media companies, siding with Missouri and Louisiana. In a lawsuit that alleges Biden and his administration violated the First Amendment by colluding with social networks to suppress disfavored speakers, viewpoints, and content. The Biden administration argued that it communicated with tech companies to counter misinformation related to elections, COVID-19, and vaccines, and that it didn't exert illegal pressure on the companies. The communications to social media companies were not significant enough to convert private conduct into government conduct. Department of Justice lawyers argued in the case. But Judge Terry Daughtry, a Trump nominee at U.S. District Court for the Western District of Louisiana, granted the plaintiff's request for a preliminary injunction imposing limits on the Department of Health and Human Services, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Justice, the U.S. Census Bureau, the State Department, the Homeland Security Department, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and many specific officials of those agencies. The injunction also affects White House officials. The agencies and officials are prohibited from communicating with social media companies for the purpose of urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing any manner of removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing containing prohibited free speech posted on social media platforms, Daughtry ruled. The injunction prohibits specifically flagged content or posts on social media platforms and or forwarding such to social media companies urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner for removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech. Government agencies and officials are further barred from urging, encouraging, or pressuring social media companies to change their guidelines for removing, deleting, suppressing, or reducing content containing protected free speech. The ruling also said the government may not coordinate with third-party groups, including the Election Integrity Partnership, the Vitality Project, and the Stanford Internet Observatory, to pressure social media companies. Daughtry provided several exceptions that allow the government to communicate with social media companies about criminal activity and other speech that the First Amendment doesn't protect. The Biden administration may continue to inform social networks about posts involving criminal activity or criminal voting, illegal campaign contributions, cyber attacks against elections, security, and posts intending to mislead voters about voting requirements and procedures. The U.S. can also exercise permissible public government speech promoting government policies or view on matters of public concern, communicate with social networks in an effort to detect, prevent, or mitigate malicious cyber activity, and communicate with social media companies about deleting, removing, suppressing, or reducing posts on social media platforms that are not protected by free speech by the Free Speech Clause in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. In addition to the Missouri and Louisiana attorneys general, the plaintiffs include professors. Oh, Moss, where are you? Jayanta, I apologize.
He's having Comcast issues.
Yeah, I see that. Jayanta Bhattacharya, Martin Koldorf, I'm terrible with names, folks, I apologize, who co-authored the October 2020 Great Barrington Declaration that opposed COVID lockdowns and urged a focus on reaching herd immunity. They and other plaintiffs claim they were censored by social networks, or they were censored by social networks. The ruling was criticized by Jamil Jaffer, an adjunct professor of law and journalism who is executive director of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University. It can't be that the government violates the First Amendment simply by engaging with the platforms about their content moderation decisions and policies. Jaffer told the New York Times, calling it a pretty radical proposition that isn't supported by case law. While the government must be careful to avoid coercion in its efforts to combat false information, Jaffer said that unfortunately Judge Daughtry's order doesn't reflect...
Doughty.
Doughty?
There's no R.
Judge Doughty, I apologize again. Order doesn't reflect a serious effort to reconcile the competing principles. Stanford...
Now, I want to stop you right there because that's pretty important there. What Jamil Jaffer said, that is kind of my opinion on it there, that even the government should at least be able to have a conversation about what's going on with companies. Even if they're not trying to enforce anything, you shouldn't impede them from being able to have that conversation about what is going on.
You know, the thing that bothers me about things like this, and it's really the reason I put it in the show notes in the first place, is because this American idea of what free speech means has really become perverted, and
most people really don't understand the concept of free speech. Like
No.
me telling someone else to shut up, that's not a violation of free speech. You know, me saying, "Oh, you can't say that in public," that's not me violating someone's free speech. Free speech is not freedom from consequences, one. And two, freedom of speech, as it's by the government, is simply the government not impeding your ability to speak.
yeah. But in the context of social media, these social media platforms are private companies, and you cannot enforce what we Americans seem to understand as First Amendment rights on a privately held... That's like somebody coming over to my house around my children using a lot of foul language, and then I tell them not to speak that way, and they use that as an argument that it's free speech. No. There,
You were allowed to say that, but now the consequence is you get to leave my house and
you
not
get to
come back
leave,
because I don't need you speaking like that around my kids.
which is where, I mean, maybe the language needs to be brought up to date a little bit, because people are using the argument, whether they have a better understanding or not, they're using the argument of free speech to apply to saying anything they want anywhere they want without any consequences whatsoever. And that's
Now,
just not how that works.
I would
this
disagree slightly. What I would disagree about is you are 100% right. They whoever these people are want to be able to say whatever they want without any consequences. However, when the shoe is on the other foot and things are said about them, suddenly they'll all start saying, "Well, you can't say that," and free speech doesn't mean freedom from consequence. All the arguments that we're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's entire, and that's what gets me about. I mean, the debate in the UK is obviously slightly different, but the best example I can think of is Brexit. Our departure from the European Union. That every time when the discussions were made and people started saying, "Look, it's going to be difficult. It's going to cause all sorts of problems. This, that, and the other." It was like, "Oh, you're stopping us, telling us what the great Sunday uplands are going to be, how life is going to be great, and whatever." And now, with life hasn't been that great, and people start pointing it out, they're like, "Well, it's my freedom of expression." But if you were to turn it round and it was something that they disagreed with, then suddenly all of these things come up. All the same things that, well, he's not free from consequences. If you say something, some things have to be done, etc., etc., etc. Do you see what I mean? It's very selective, right? The same people who get triggered by, "Oh, social media is limiting what I can speak, blah, blah, blah." Yeah, but if that view is something that they disagree with, then it's like, "Oh, it's terrible."
Well,
You
what
can't
about
say that on social
the
media.
case like this, where the social media companies themselves are filtering content that is
And
accepted by
no,
whoever,
I can explain.
that this,
I
maybe
can
there is
explain this right here.
some widespread damage that could come in because people are spreading a lot of crap about
No, I
vaccines and
agree.
stuff like that.
I agree
Okay,
100%. I agree with
let's set the
100%.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, the whole thing there is civil liability. So you have this social network company, whatever, that allows people to say whatever they want. Misinformation gets widely spread. That company can be sued for allowing that to happen, as well as the individuals that were spreading the misinformation. So here's where people start getting a little jumpy about it, is in order to protect themselves, these social media companies need to put in place some kind of controls, some kind of filters, something that limits speech, limits you from being able to say whatever the hell you want to. And then that's where people get into the whole, "Oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech." But once again, like Bill said, these are private companies. They need to protect themselves. And so they can
100%.
restrict whatever needs restricting. And sorry, freedom of speech, but you know what? Not in my house. These are things you can't say in the social media company's house. Go ahead, Moss.
Hi, everybody. Am I back?
Yes, you
You
are.
are back.
Well, then we probably need to do another 0.
No, because we're not using Audacity anymore anyway. I'm just going to pull the YouTube. But I do need you to go to your video screen to re-enable the echo cancellation.
I never enabled it in the first place.
No, I enabled it.
He
when you came
enables it
back
for
up.
you, but you need to be clicked on the page for it.
Well, I am. I'm there.
There you go. Okay, so
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so as we're saying, I mean, Joe's exactly spot on about that. End of the day, these are private companies, and nobody wants to get brought through the court. I'm sure that a lot of the people who are getting so exercised by this, if there was, I don't know, a freedom of speech loving social media network, which was basically saying something that they disagreed with, I wouldn't be surprised if they sued them by saying, "Well, this is misinformation. Oh, we are the Republican Party isn't fascist," as an example, and so said this, it was fascist. We're going to take them to court. But, why can't I say that the Democrats are socialists and communists? Why can't I say that? That's my freedom of speech. And it's kind of like, yeah, all right, mate. off you must F, far away.
Indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hate how I have to tell people that you can't have an argument like this with. We all know those people that are just simply incapable, or whether by choice or by their level of understanding, to have this kind of conversation about these things.
And just to be fair, there are many people of all different political persuasions who are like this. It's not just the ones that I've mentioned.
You're absolutely true.
Yeah, basically the way that human beings work is I should be allowed to do everything, but if anything bad happens to me, they need to be screwed over. That's the way
Yes.
human beings seem to work, unfortunately.
Yes.
And the same kind of rights that somebody will fight about in one place, they will deny somewhere else. Unfortunately, I have far too much experience of that. So, yeah. Anywho,
Yes, this is not civil rights mintcast.
But we need to make a stand, Moss. We have to be heard on these subjects.
I have a stand right here. What are you talking about?
That's a cattle joke, by the way.
I think it's about not falling into people's narratives. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And having a being able to understand the issues as they are without being partisan about it. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is just completely partisan. As I said, tomorrow, if it was something that they disagreed with, I bet you they'll be the first people they're suing Twitter or Facebook.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to distros, Joe.
Oh, well, were we done with that article? There was quite a bit left.
Yeah, there was a few more things, but it was all just...
I think we got to the nub of it. I think
we dragged it behind the truck far enough.
It'll be in the show notes. Okay, Solus 4 is released. This is from getsol.us. We are proud to announce the immediate availability of Solus 4.4, a new Solus 4 series release named Harmony. This release delivers new desktop environment updates, software stacks, and hardware enablement. Default applications. All our editions feature Firefox 114.0.1, LibreOffice 7.5.3.2, Thunderbird 102.12.0. For audio and video multimedia playback, we offer software out of the box that caters specifically to our desired experience for each edition. Budgie, Gnome, and Mate editions all ship with Rhythmbox for audio playback, with the latest release of the alternate toolbar extension to provide a more modern user experience. Budgie and Gnome ship with Celluloid for video playback. Mate ships with VLC for video playback. Plasma ships with Elisa for audio playback and Haruna for video playback. Hardware and kernel enablement. This release of Solus ships with Linux kernel 6.3.8, enabling us to provide support for a broader range of hardware, such as secure boot support, see our documentation for enablement, AMD Radeon RX 7600, 7900 XT, and 7900 XTX cards, Intel Arc cards, NVIDIA 40 series cards, support for laptops defaulting their NVMe controllers to RAID mode, support for laptops with ATH11K Wi-Fi, better support for various light sensors and accelerometers. Additionally, we continue to refine our kernel configuration, and this release features changes such as ZRAM enabled by default out of the box, providing a better user experience for devices with low amount of memory, less than 3 gig. Enable config NFT fib inet to allow firewalled NF tables to work. Mesa has been upgraded to 2303. This produces various improvements such as Nouveau 3D support for NVIDIA 30 series GPUs, improvements to Zinc driver, RADV Vulkan, mesh shaders, RADV ray tracing changes, optimizations for Intel Arc DG2 graphics. Updates to the various desktops are described in the link.
Yeah, I didn't think we needed to go over every single desktop and what they've added to it.
I agree. And I don't know how many people use Solus. I mean, I have in the past just to test it out, but that was the way distant past. I think it might have been like...
I've used it on and off, sometimes as a main driver, usually not. I know Dale Miracles use them a lot.
I think it's interesting that there seemed to be this whole period of stagnation with Solus. And I remember, was it 6, 8 months ago? There was a lot of churn at the company and all that sort of
They have
stuff.
had team issues, yes.
Yeah, and so it's good to see that they are still pumping out the new releases.
Well,
With most of the
Ike,
original team there,
Ike's come back, yeah.
Ike's come back. Well, so has Josh Strobel.
Yeah, Josh Rowe.
He had left for a while just to work on Budgie, and now he's back on. He's actually more or less leading the team. So
And
apparently, the problems that Josh had with the person that wound up leading the team went away when that person stopped leading the team, and the team fell apart.
and the only other thing I have to say is I don't care what desktop it is. I'm using VLC.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the one issue that I've heard Solus has a problem with, and that is the availability of software because it's its own de novo distro. It's not Ubuntu or Debian or Fedora based or whatever. Most of the major software packages that you want are available, but once in a while things won't be, and then you'll have to put a request in, and then that request has to go through the team and whatever. As I said, it's not something that's ever affected me because I don't use anything particularly interesting outside of the usual. But I can imagine it would be an issue for some people who do slightly more niche things on their devices.
Yeah. Well, the new version is based more on Serpent OS than what it was earlier. And they're using a lot of Serpent tools and whatnot. I've been calling it Surplus myself, just as a joke.
Well done, Moss.
Anyhow, let's move on. We're done with the news. We've had enough news. Let's go to security and
About
privacy.
enough of that news.
So in security and privacy, take it, Bill.
Oh, you know it. Stack rot, a new Linux kernel privilege escalation vulnerability. From Security Affairs on July 7th. Stack rot is a new security vulnerability in the Linux kernel that could be exploited to give elevated privileges on a targeted system. A security vulnerability dubbed stack rot was found in impacting Linux version 6.1 through 6.4. The issue, tracked as CVE 2023-3269 with a CVSS score of 7.8, is a privilege escalation issue that resides in the memory management subsystem. An unprivileged local user can trigger the flaw to compromise the kernel and escalate privileges. The vulnerability was discovered in the handling of stack expansion in the Linux kernel 6.1 through 6.4. As stack rot is a Linux kernel vulnerability found in the memory management subsystem, it affects almost all kernel configurations and requires minimal capabilities to trigger. However, it should be noted that Maple nodes are freed using RCU callbacks. Oh, well, thank God. Delaying...
What's a Maple node?
Delaying the actual memory deallocation until after the RCU grace period. Consequently, exploiting this vulnerability is considered challenging, reads the advisory published by security researcher Ruhan Li from Peking University. The researcher pointed out that this is the first exploit targeting use after free by RCU or UAFBR bugs. This makes the first instance where UAFBR bugs have been proven to be exploitable even without the presence of config underscore preempt or config underscore slab underscore merge underscore default settings. Continues the advisory. Notably, this exploit has been successfully demonstrated in the environment provided by Google KCTF VPR, BZ Image Upstream 6.1.25, and there's some image extensions here that must have been
Gobbledygook, yes.
Yeah. The vulnerability was disclosed on June 15th, 2023, and it has been addressed on July 1st, 2023. The flaw was introduced with the Linux kernel version 6.1 due to the migration to Maple trees. Okay. Maple trees are RCU-safe B-tree data structures optimized for strong, non-overlapping ranges. Lee pointed out that the intricate nature of maple trees allows complexity to the code base and introduces the stack rot vulnerability. Whoop. I had the same thing just happen that you have, Moss. The good news is, at this time, there are no evidence that the vulnerability has been exploited in attacks in the wild. Additional technical details about the issue will be publicly released by the end of the month, along with a proof of concept exploit. And I have never heard of maple trees.
Nope, me either. But I
But
will say
what
that
does this do to the syrup?
yeah, right. That your dyslexia is making
Must be
itself
Canadian.
known today.
My gosh.
Okay.
Well, your gosh is about the same as usual, but let's hear about Majid's gosh.
Okay, so introducing Proton Pass. See, I've got protein on the mind. I've been to the gym today. Anyway, so this is from the Proton blog. Proton announced the global launch of Proton Pass on June 28th, available now as a browser extension on major browsers: Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Brave, and more, and iPhone, iPad, and Android. As the name suggests, Proton Pass is a password manager, one of the most highly demanded services from the Proton community in their annual survey since they first launched Proton Mail back in 2014. At its core, a password manager is a tool that helps you generate secure passwords and save them so you never forget a password again. If you care about your security and privacy, you should use a service like Proton Pass, they say, because passwords are still the first line of defense for most online accounts. Proton Pass makes it easy to follow security best practices like using a passphrase instead of a password, or using a unique password for every website without worrying about forgetting your passwords. Also saves you time by letting you log in with one click when you return to the website. Proton Pass does all this for free, but also with their unparalleled attention to privacy and encryption. However, as participants in the Proton Pass beta on Proton Lifetime Visionary or Family Plan will know, it's more than just a password manager, it's an identity manager, which is a much more powerful concept.
And they dropped it right there. They don't want to say what an identity manager is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because I mean, I would have thought that would be the thing to then discuss what exactly is an identity manager. I mean, this sounds
more
good
than just
stuff.
yeah.
I mean, this sounds good and stuff, but I'm not sure what it adds that Bitwarden doesn't already add.
Well,
integration. I don't know. If you're a Proton user,
I can stop paying Bitwarden $10 a year to do my password management. Whoopee.
Well, I don't pay Bitwarden anything.
Moss,
You
do
self-host?
use Proton Pass? I know that you have a lot of Proton stuff that you are currently using.
I just bought into a Visionaire plan with Firecat, and I have not started using Proton Pass yet. I am underusing all the capabilities made available to me through the Visionaire plan. I don't much use Drive, but it's still nice to know it's all available.
Something for you to bring back to us later after you
Watch
start
this
using it
space.
a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't see how it helps saving $10 a year, which I let Bitwarden host my stuff, which costs $10 a year. But I'll look at it.
I mean, I genuinely don't pay Bitwarden anything, and I don't self-host it either. So have I missed something, or have I managed to just accidentally get it for free?
I mean, are you using Bitwarden?
Yeah, Bitwarden's my password manager on all my devices.
Well, it costs $10 a year for them to host.
If you're using it on more than one device, then it has to be hosted on their server, and that's unless you got in on some kind of beta plan or something. I don't know, but yeah,
grandfathered plan or something.
Yeah.
Maybe.
You're,
I mean, I have had it
you're,
for a long time.
you're paying and you don't even know it. I
Well,
found. Oh,
yeah, that is also.
that's not me making fun of you because I've got several things that I've been paying for years.
Yeah, you should go back to that episode where
Yeah,
Bill went over all of his things that he
Oh, and
pays
I
for on a
came up
monthly
with a few
basis.
more after we were done. I thought, yeah, I forgot about that one, that one, that one, that one, that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going through it now. It's like I can't see where I've paid because I don't think so. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, who knows? Who knows? Who cares?
Okay, well, that's it for security this episode. Let's move on. Bi-weekly wanderings. And since I'm running the show, I get to go first. Yay. I've spent the past week trying to get enough sleep and, as usual, got my podcast done. My review for Distro Hopper's Digest was Debian 12 Mate, and I was a lot more comfortable with it than I've been for any previous Debian release. As I commented in my review, I can't wait for LMDE to come out with Debian 12. I'm still having issues with Xfinity keeping signal coming to my house 24/7, as we experienced earlier in this episode, and can't wait until KUB gets fiber to my neighborhood, which is projected for May of 2024. I actually sold $37 worth of music during May, probably my high month at least since my professional quality CD came out many years back. I guess it's not time to retire on my music earnings just yet. I finished reading Demon Squad to my old friend up in Detroit. Only 10 books so far, but there is an 11th in the works. I started reading the Paper Magician series by Charlie M. Holmberg to her. I tried to edit my personal website and was told the proxy server refused the connection. I am running the Proton VPN that I got through my Visioneer plan, as we were talking earlier. I turned off the VPN and it worked fine. I contacted my web host, whose Visioneer plan I am on, and he said he doesn't have a problem with it, but I needed to check and see if my firewall was turned off. So I turned off USC and got the same result. When the VPN is on, I can't connect. When the VPN is off, it goes right through. So that was my challenge for this week, and I haven't got a resolution to it except turn off the VPN if I want to edit my website. I don't work on my website enough. So...
and why do you need a VPN to get on your website?
I just run VPN from my browser, you know.
And why do you need that to edit a website, though?
Well, I don't need it to edit a website. I just run it on my browser constantly.
It's always turned on, yeah.
It's always turned on, so I have to go in and turn it off to edit my website.
I feel like you got some router issues going on. I'm not sure what, but all these things seem to add up to router issues, but I digress.
Well, the Comcast issue is a Comcast issue. We had this starting to happen and thought that it was my modem had gotten old or something. It was over 8 years old and had been run continuously. And so I bought a new modem and it's happening more. So I'm pretty sure it's Xfinity. But whether that has anything to do with the VPN / website editing problem, I don't know. Anyhow, that's it for me. I don't need to talk about this anymore. It's frustrating enough having it happen. Joe?
Next up, me. Okay, well, Moss, I do want to say my dad recommended a book series to me recently while I was in Florida, and I've listened to, it's actually a couple of series of books together, and the first series was excellent. So if you need something else to read to a friend or something, try out Dragon Blood by Lindsay Buroker.
I have read about 40 Lindsay Buroker books.
So many books.
And they are really excellent in and of themselves, but the more Lindsay Buroker you read, the more you find out that all of her females are strong protagonists that go out and whoop tail, and all of her males are assholes. That they're either good assholes or bad assholes, depending on how they respond to the lead characters. But that's it. Every now and again, she throws a wimp husband in, or ex-husband. But by and large, you got strong, dumb, uncaring males and strong, very carrying females. And after you read about 40 books, you stop. That I have not read that series, but I've read other series, some of which relate in together. The
I
That's
will
not.
say that
Death Before
there is
Dragons is
some
a
of
prequel to Legacy of Magic, and I've read both of those series.
I will say that yes, this does follow that pattern when it comes to characters.
Is there not a space for strong male characters and strong female characters to exist in the same universe?
But do strong male characters have to be assholes?
Yeah,
I
well,
would say
okay, so
that
strong and morally unbankrupt.
I can name one series that has both strong male and female characters that are actually good people, and that would be the Mercedes Thompson series. Don't ask me the author off the top of my head, but that series does have strong male and strong female characters that are of good moral character, I would say, and not complete and total jerks.
Yeah, I also read Lindsay Broker's Witch in Wolf Wood series, which was a lot of fun, but the witchcraft was really crappy. And again, it's the same male and female, and there are more stupid people. And when stupid people do something to hurt a non-stupid person, and that person responds, then they're dragging them over the coals because you can't do that to us. And I'm going, but you did it to her first, and
Well, I've only read 8 books of hers so far. I do have plans to read several
they
more.
are fun to read.
I
But
will see
the
if
more
the
you
trend
read, the more
continues.
it's like you've read this before.
Right, right. It's yeah. Okay. Well, on to my actual innards. I've been spending a lot of time at work talking to the new interns. They're all working on AI. I enjoy talking to them. They actually are very knowledgeable and also willing to learn, which is nice because a lot of times with my regular workers, you don't see that willingness to learn. I have introduced them to mintCast, and I hope that they like it and find it informative. So if you're listening, please enjoy the show, Mike, Sebastian, and UN. Also, it's been fun to talk to UN about Korea because she's from South Korea, so we've been to some of the same places over there. Now, I attempted to make my own neckband headphones using the same methods that I did with the other Bluetooth devices that I made. The 3D design came out well, but I did not finish putting it together because I did not like the overall size that they ended up being. Part of this is because the battery that I wanted to use was the 14500 battery, which is about the size of a AA battery, but it is 3.7 volts, so just a little bit larger. The battery should last a very long time, and with a stock charger should also take probably a very long time to charge. I can fix that by adding a second charger. It was the first iteration, and I might try a few more things where I may go all the way back to the CAD board, and using smaller lithium batteries, I may make something closer to the low-profile Skull Candies or JBLs that I have seen and I do own a couple pairs of. If I stick with something close to this design, I'm going to have to redo portions of it that hold the Bluetooth device and the lids, the closures, because I want them to be a little bit more secure while still being able to take it apart. Now, I 3D printed the Pine Cell case. I know I had talked about it on a previous show, and it's for the next time I go traveling. I got the STL from Thingiverse, and I mentioned this print because it does require a single 608 bearing for holding the pine cell while it's hot. I was able to get 10 of those 608 bearings for less than $5, and this leaves me a lot to play around with other prints. I don't know if I want to make a fidget spinner, but there are several other things that I will be printing in the near future. But the next thing up I am 3D printing is a replacement spool roller for the top of my Ender 3. The stock one is not very good and puts a lot of tension on the filament. The one that I have the one that I had as a replacement for that sits beside the machine. It's nice, it works well, but it takes up space on the table, and it would be nice to put that spool on top again and use that space for something else. Plus, I want to see what size bearings are in that one. And this print that is on my printer right now and going is it will use 3 of those 608 bearings. So, 4 of them will be used total. I will still have 6 left. Now, I also 3D printed some mini phone stands that will fit on a keychain. I think that they're cool and will make awesome little gifts for people. I printed out like 12 of them at this point. I'll probably put 2 on my keychain and use both to help with balance. I did not like the original design on them that I got from Thingiverse, and so I decided to throw it into Tinkercad and readjust some of the angles so that the phone would stand up properly in both orientations and have slightly better balance when only using one. I mean, the first iteration that came out, because I printed it just as the person had it, yeah, the phone basically stood straight up, which was fine in portrait mode, but not so good in landscape mode. So I fixed it. Now I'm thinking about switching out some of my filament with by trying out some PLA with some carbon fiber because it supposedly prints well and makes for sturdier prints. But if I want to start 3D printing things for my car, I'm going to need to switch to something like PETG, ABS, or nylon, or there are some other less temperature sensitive things with a lower with a higher glass transition temperature. But all of those print better with an enclosure. Now you can do PETG without an enclosure, but it has to be dry, and I need to order some more desiccant for my dryer. I also want to say there that once you get into the higher temperature materials, it's a good idea to switch out your tubing, because that will start outgassing on the Ender 3 at around 240 degrees, and some of these require 250 degree printing. So the easiest and cheapest solution is to change out that PTFE tubing for something rated at a higher temperature. If you want to go beyond 250, 260, then you need to start looking at all metal hot ends, and then you start having problems printing with PLA due to heat creep. Whew, wow, I almost sounded like I knew what I was talking about there. Now, I started my journey with OpenSCAD. I had talked about learning that in the past and had it installed on my server out in the garage, but I finally started using it. I have a lot to learn with it, but I was doing a bit of coding to get some positioning and some shapes correct, which is nice. I haven't done coding in a while. Really simple things, but I was making a 3D printed business card with my name and phone number on it. I wanted to add a QR code, which I will do later, that will go either to my resume or directly to my LinkedIn account. And I think that would be a fun thing to do. Tinkercad is useful, but it is extremely simple. And I would like to use something a little more robust eventually, and just, promote my own self-growth there. I also found out that OpenSCAD is the program that I will be using to modify all of the Thingiverse models with the word customizable in the title. If I get good enough at it, maybe I'll bring it to one of the Saturday shows or something and just do a simple tutorial. Now, I had some trouble with a Lux encrypted drive. Nothing important really on it, but after the power went out at my house and my computer restarted, I was no longer able to decrypt the drive. Everything looked to be working with the drive. It mounted, and the partition showed in disks. I was trying a few things out and saw that it was always a permission issue, so I ended up switching to root, and I was able to decrypt and mount as root. And then I had to go in and change the permissions, and I was also able to then access the drive through Nemo as a regular user, but my regular user still cannot decrypt the drive. I'm thinking something must be corrupted in it, but at least I'm able to get the information off.
Are you able to make a new key?
I haven't tried that yet. I'll have to look at how to do that.
The key might have got corrupted, not the drive itself.
That's probably it, because I did go in and test the file system, and it shows that absolutely nothing is wrong with the file system. So either I need to update the key, or I'll just end up pulling all the data off, reformatting the drive, re-putting Lux on it, and then moving everything back. Now, I had a lot of things to do this weekend. The schedule has been absolutely hectic. I worked yesterday, and then I had to go to a going away event for some friends afterwards. Thankfully, one of my coworkers was willing to cover that overlap time since I was working second shift. And it was a really easy day at work, but I'm still really grateful that Ron was able to just take over there for that last hour and a half so that I could go visit my friends before they leave town for forever. Okay, and then, well, on Friday, on my way to work, another one of the Windows controllers broke in my Buick. This is actually the third one, and sadly, it is one that I had to fix. It's the driver's side front. I have to be able to roll that window down, even if it's just to badge into work. This is a very common problem for that model of and year of Buick. The plastic gears age and crack and break, and then the cables bind in the motor. Now, previously, I had this fixed from a shop, and to have them do it, it cost me around $300, a little over, I think. But because of my current financial times, I was not able to do that this time. The rail and the motor come in one piece, and I was able to order it from Amazon for about $45. But it is different for each window, each of the 4 windows. So it's not like, I can just take the other one, repair it, and put it in another one. It got here last night, and like I said, I need my window working before tomorrow. So I went out there this morning and took the door apart, and I fixed it. Thank you, YouTube, for the tutorials. I will probably work on the other 2 in the near future. It's a really good price. It was kind of nice working on a car again, but it also kind of sucked because it rained this morning right before I went out there. So window open, rain coming down, seats nice and wet. That's where I'm working.
But it was cooler.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It wasn't a bajillion degrees. But still, for how easy it was, you can't complain about saving $250 by doing it yourself. Now, a couple of other things are also going to need to be fixed in the car eventually, and I'm sure that I will talk about them on the show when I get to them. The HVAC control needs to be replaced. Some of the functionality is missing because the controller is starting to mess up, but it works well enough for now. I definitely want to replace the stereo because tape decks are useless, and I want to get rid of some of the adapters that I have there. I don't know what kind of stereo I want to go with, though. I could do like Android Drive or whatever it's called, or I could go with a Raspberry Pi DIY build, but I would have my concerns about whatever screen I could source for that in the Texas heat. Basically, everything in that screen turning to liquid. I want to pull the old ashtray out of the front along with the accessory port that is there and replace it with more accessory ports and some built-in USB ports. I'd love to do USB-C, but I haven't seen any that connect directly that have an accessory port and a high-speed USB-C, so just secondary ones. Now, the front windshield on my car has a crack in it, and it does need to be replaced, but I don't think I can do that one by myself, so I'm probably going to end up paying somebody to do that. And I want to say the new pills the VA has me on are okay. I think I'm going to need to start taking them a little bit later in the mornings because, my God, the crash is so bad from them. Like, when the energy wears out from those, I am just done. I come home from work and I just want to take a nap. Or I'm thinking that I'm going to try just like not drinking any caffeine until much later in the afternoon. So that way I got that little pick me up on my way home. And yeah, that's really kind of what I've been up to. Bill?
Well, I've been sick lately, which, yeah. But I'm going to soldier on here. I don't have much to talk about, but I did get a new microphone that I'm using to make today's show. I don't know why. I don't know why I bought it, but I've got it. It was $18. The thing about this microphone, it's made by a company called Newer.
It's Newer, yeah.
Newer, yeah.
They
make a lot
made
of
my They made my boom arm. It was about $15.
Yeah, I've got like 6 or 7 boom arms that I use. Actually, I might have about 10 because I've got 2 holding up my little studio lighting here, and then 1 holding up this microphone, and another one holding the webcam. They're all over the place, and then the lighting is also made by that company, and then a couple other things I've got too. So it's a company that I like. This thing only costed $18. The only reason I got kind of interested in it is because on one of my other shows, Three Fat Truckers, one of the other guys got one of these microphones, and surprisingly it sounded pretty good. It is a condenser, so it works more like the human ear, picking up the ambient sound in the environment. Now it's hooked up to a Focusrite Scarlett Solo, which does some work to clean up what it gets, but anyway, it's going to pick up other stuff that's going on around me. So if it starts picking up kids playing, or the wife watching TV, or talking on her phone or whatever, or anything going on, then it's going to have to go back to the I'm going to have to go back to the Q2U, which, watch this space on that, I suppose. But
Yeah, I really think your Q2U sounded better, but I might be prejudiced on that.
I mean, that's a good mic. It really, really is. I think we should all be using it because it's, especially if you got noise going on around you, because the thing about a dynamic mic, as opposed to one of these, they're really made to just process the audio that diaphragm inside the head is capturing, whereas these things, they're meant to pick up
You want to send me a Q2U, I will use it.
Okay, I tried to
Hey,
send one.
Ronnie at Full Circle paid for mine.
Yeah, they're worth having. I mean, but it's not the only one out there that does a good job. There are others, but they are good for that kind of environment, for when you've got a lot of stuff going on around you. These are really more made for soundproof, professional studio environments. So we'll just see how it goes. I guess the reason I went with something like this is because I wanted to be able to just put it in one place, move my head around looking at all this stuff, and then have this thing still hear me the same as it would. Because if you listen to people that have proper microphones, if they're not right up on it, speaking directly into it, the sound starts to diminish somewhat, and I wanted to try to deal with that. But like other things, it's all a big trade-off. You get one thing, but you lose another, But we'll see how it goes. Other than that, let's see. I've been tweaking on my Rock Pro 64, which has been sitting dormant since I decided to run all the websites in Docker containers. That's just way too easy way to handle that. My use of all my SBCs has lessened in favor of more powerful machines. One thing has been piquing my curiosity is how well Nextcloud would run in a Docker container on one of these machines. I mean, because I've only ever ran Nextcloud on bare metal on an SBC. And what I mean by SBC is single board computer, something like an Odroid or an Orange Pi or a Raspberry Pi, or in this case a Rock Pro 64. But in my case, the Rock Pro 64, the thing that's compelling about that device is that it's got a X4 PCIe slot, which means you can basically break the idea that it's a SBC, because once you put another card on there, it's not really a single board anymore, but I digress. I got a card. You can order directly from them a card with 2 SATA ports on it. And then you can get a NAS box that's got a rack in it that will hold either 2 3.5-inch drives or 2 2.5-inch drives. Actually, it'll hold both, but you can only hook up with the card you can order from them. You can only hook up 2 of those devices. Well, I got a card off of Amazon that can hook up all 4 of them, and then a couple of adapters for the power cords, and it works just fine as long as you're not doing any kind of RAID it works pretty good, because I ran into some serious problems trying to do. At first, I was trying to do a ButterFS RAID with Nextcloud a year or so ago, about 2 years ago, and that corrupted the drives. It corrupted them to the point where I had to send them back to Seagate. And then I tried that with ZFS, and the exact same thing happened. And it's all because these things just don't handle RAID very well. So, got 2 SSDs from Silicon Power. Silicon Power makes an SSD that is either witchcraft or alien technology that has been given to us for a very cheap price, because these are perfectly capable SSDs, and they cost, I don't know, like a fifth what a Samsung drive would cost, and they seem to be perfectly good. I mean, in some cases, the benchmarks outran the Samsungs.
I will say that they take longer to clone than Samsung drives by a wide margin, but I use them for everything I use. Yeah.
So you've got this concept with SSDs where you've got a triple cell or a quadruple cell, and the triple cell is going to be faster than the quadruple cell, something to do with the time it takes to jazz up these cells. And then you got a single cell, which is the fastest, but it's also the most expensive way to make an SSD. And it's harder to make large SSDs out of a single cell sort of array. But what Silicon Power does is they make a cache on the drive with an SLC layout. So it writes to that SLC first, and then it writes to the TLC, the triple, which increases the speed. It makes the benchmark it makes the drive seem like it's writing faster than a Samsung drive, which
until
is
the cache fills.
Because of the cache, yeah, and that's actually kind of cool, I think. Whether or not they last as long, I mean, that's going to be the only thing.
They won't, because you have that triple layer. It's basically using each spot 3 times as much.
Yeah,
But still, you're not going to notice.
Well, there are different models doing different things. I've got a number of A55s around.
That's what I got. I've got a 128 gig and a 512 gig in here, and I mean they're like $10 for that 128.
Yeah, and they are a little bit slower than your top end like Samsungs and stuff, but really most people just aren't going to notice. And I use them all
Comparing them to spinning metal, their vision.
They're still faster than spinning metal. So.
But yeah, I got that in there, and then see with this another thing with this Rock Pro, if you install Armbian comes with Armbian config, which is somewhat similar to Raspberry or Raspi config, but there's a few more options in there, and one of them is to move everything in the root directory, with the exception of the boot partition or the boot directory, onto one of those SSDs, and then just boot from the SD card, and then everything runs from the SSD. And there's a million reasons why that's a good idea.
That's actually the way that Raspberry Pi used to do it. So you could have the boot partition on the micro SD card, and then everything else on an SSD hooked up over USB, which made things considerably faster and more stable. But since then, Raspberry has made it so that you can just boot directly from USB. So.
Yeah, this board will not do that, but it will allow you to put everything, all of the system files, anywhere. I mean, I also tried out an NVMe PCI card, but once you put that in the slot's being used, and you can't plug anything else into it. So you basically got what's on the SD card and then what's on that NVMe, which, I mean, if it was about performance, then that would be the way I would go. But in this case, I'm kind of looking at like a personal Nextcloud that's separate from, the one that we use for the show, because I think as much as we've filled our Nextcloud, I think it's half the data is still stuff off my phone and whatever. So I was thinking about siloing that off on my own machine because I don't need the performance that we need for the show because I'm not going to have a document server running or anything like that. I have found that it is perfectly performant so far with 4 drives hooked up. Like I said, as long as I'm not trying to do any fancy RAID type magic. Now I do have 2 big NAS drives sitting in there, but what I think I'm going to do is I'm not using ButterFS or ZFS because I don't want to use anything that's going to rely heavily on RAM. It's just a extended 4, and then I'm going to make an rsync script to basically just back up that all the Nextcloud data from one drive to the other. So I mean, it's a hot plugged backup basically, and I don't see how that would be other than some strange electrical issue taking out both drives. I don't know. You could argue that could happen and ruin your life, a lot of other ways too. But it seems to be that, Nextcloud running in a Docker container on this machine seems to run just as well as the bare metal did on this machine, and certainly as good as the Snap did. The Snap, I don't know, it's not really usable for me because you don't have access to a file system outside that Snap unless you do some weird bind mounting and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so far so good with that. I'm kind of happy with it. Kind of happy to have a use for it. I'm looking for projects to put my Raspberry Pis on, because right now the only one I'm using is my Pi 3 to run Pi-hole, which is probably overpowered for what Pi-hole needs. And I'm thinking about taking the Pi 4 and making a Minecraft server with, or something like that, for the kids and their friends to hook up to. But I keep telling my boy to look up, some information on how to get started with that, but he's dragging his feet, so I might have to end up being the catalyst to get that whole thing moving. Anyway, I don't...
Couple of things there.
Yeah.
One, your Pi 3 is way overpowered for running Pi-hole, and I would suggest also putting like Pi VPN on there and like using WireGuard from that. I have been using
Pi VPN is running on this one. And
yeah, but you can put them together and then free up a Pi. So, and then Minecraft doesn't really run on a Pi, but there is Blockcraft, which is, a Minecraft clone that runs on the Pi. At least that's what my son tells me.
Oh.
Because it's not Minecraft, Dad.
So what do I have to put a Minecraft server on? Is there a Docker
Windows?
container or something? Oh, well, moving on.
Let's hear from Majid. He's been waiting patiently.
He has.
Okay, so if anybody's following the economic news in the UK, you'll know that inflation has hit 9%. So why is this relevant on mintCast? Well, I need to really start thinking about some of my tech purchases and habits. I'm always buying something new or whatever. And so I took a bit of a stock count, and I realized exactly how many superfluous things I have. Now, most of it isn't particularly high value, but when you put it all together, I could probably get about $1,000 out of it, which would be very useful considering that my thanks to the Tories, my mortgage is going to go up by £500 a month in a couple of months' time. I've been using Facebook Marketplace, but it's full of scammers, full of people saying, oh, if you just pay me this and I'll send you this and I'll do it. It's just like, no, forget that. I had stopped using eBay because their fees have been getting higher and higher. But at least I suppose I'm less likely to get scammed. And if it's just a case of just getting the stuff out of the door so that I actually may, have some profit.
Well, yeah, but it's eBay running the scam on you.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it, actually. Yeah.
With Facebook Marketplace, just put up there cash or Venmo only, in person only.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that. I put that collection only, bank transfer or cash. That's what I've put. And I mean, it's not like I haven't sold stuff on the in the past. But it is a bit. But it's just, yeah, 90% of the people that contact you saying, "Oh, I'm interested," they're just trying to scam you. Now, this doesn't mean I have completely stopped buying stuff. I replaced the Work Pixel 7 that I had with a Note 20 Ultra, and the battery life is actually much better on the Note 20 Ultra. Bearing in mind it's a 2-year-old phone, well, almost 3-year-old phone, in fact. And the S Pen does come in handy for some of the kind of signing and things that I need to do, reports and whatever. More specifically, when it comes to Linux, I'm just waiting for the final release of Mint 21.2. I know I think there's a release candidate now, but yeah, I'm just waiting for the final release because I actually want to try Mint properly after almost a decade of using other things. And I also want to see how the touchpad gestures and things that they've got will work. They've got some apparently better improved support for touch. So I'm thinking of putting it on my one of my tablet stroke convertibles. The only thing that's stopping me actually at the minute is, and this was just probably me not having investigated it enough, is there something like KDE Connect on Mint? Because I know the GNOME people have GS Connect.
You can install KDE Connect on Mint. And
Or GS Connect or Zorin Connect. They're all about the same thing.
Most of the functionality is there.
Okay. So okay. So that's what I'll do. Work has been busy as it always is. I've got another one of my 24-hour shifts tomorrow. Fantastic. And there's more strike. Yeah, there's more strikes happening. And now the attendings are going to be going on strike. So that actually includes me. I'm still mulling it over, but I'm quite excited by the novelty of being on a picket line. I think I'll quite enjoy that. Get my old socialist songs out, be the trot at the barricades.
I've got a bunch of them recorded if you want.
The irony, unfortunately, though, well, not unfortunately, it may. So what the plan is, the contingency planning is a Christmas Day service. So basically, there will be emergency people available, to do emergency work, but anything that is planned in any way, shape, or form is not going to be happening. So planned clinic, a planned operating list, anything like that. Now, by chance, I'm actually on emergencies that day. So I don't know whether I will be allowed to then strike because now what the British Medical Association have said is I can still strike as long as they get someone to do that emergency shift for me who isn't striking. It may well be a academic point though, because I have heard murmurings that because it's a smaller group of doctors, the attendings, relatively speaking, compared to say the junior doctors and whatever, they're more inclined for a solution, especially since they know that these are natural conservative voters, generally speaking. It's rare to find an attending who's a Labour supporter. Myself, I'm an outlier, and so I think there's a little bit more impetus for that. Let's see. Anyway, on personal stuff, we've been cat sitting. I don't know if you've seen the cats kind of coming in saying hi on the stream. It's been a bit of an experience because we've never had cats. In fact, actually, we've never had a proper pet before. No particular reason, just haven't. I quite like having cats, actually. My daughter's been on about having cats for the last 3 years, and I've been batting it off. And then one of my wife's friends was going abroad, and so we've been looking after them. I'm reminded of the Winston Churchill comment that a dog looks at its master and sees its master, A cat looks at its master and sees a servant, and a pig looks at its master and sees an equal. And so I am clearly the servant in the cat human being relationship.
You can develop different relationships with your cats. I do not have that relationship with mine. Mine are very much family members, not masters or anything.
Yeah, no, but I mean the
Think so,
point.
huh?
Yeah, I can tell them don't go in there, and they don't go in there, or they get squirted.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being slightly facetious, but I mean, it is true. A pet is a family member. That is 100% true. So the owners have put Apple AirTags on them. Now, I do still have a iDevice in the house because it hasn't managed to sell yet. And so I've got it registered on that, and I can see now how this ecosystem lock-in works. You know, yeah. For example, I've had to take my iPad off sale because it's the only thing that will track these Apple AirTags. They do work quite well together, I must say. The kind of the setup is zilch. There's nothing. You just bring the AirTag close to the iPad or iPhone, and it recognizes it. You name it, and then you can even get Siri to do it. So I've put the cat's names on, and you can just say, hey Siri, where's Fluffy or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I can see why people do get locked into it. Obviously, it costs. Once they got them, I really felt like telling them, why did you get these Apple AirTags? Nobody's got an Apple iPhone here. But then I saw how much they cost, and I thought, okay, well, I better just they bought them, so I might as well use them. That's me at the minute, really.
And that about covers our bi-weekly wanderings. Let's move on to Linux Innards. Okay, in this week's episode, we're going to get into web browsers. What are their differences, similarities, and which ones to keep your eye on? I'm going to let you guys fight over this stuff. I don't know anything.
Well, when I first wrote this, when I started writing this up, I thought, okay, because I didn't get to this as quickly as I wanted to, but I thought, what is a good way to categorize these things? And I suppose technical people probably ought to talk about what they, the basic difference between one browser and another is the engine that they're built upon. And then beyond that, it's all about the things that are stacked up on top of that to make them, a little bit user friendly for people, or have functionality that one might have more than the other.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of because I remember we were discussing this on the live stream yesterday. How is the best way to kind of divide them up and categorize them? And there's something in medicine that if you don't know the answer to something, categorize. And so the three main categories are Blink, Gecko, and WebKit. But we'll go into that a bit more in detail, won't we? So. Blink is a browser engine developed as part of the Chromium project with contributions from Google, Meta, Microsoft, Opera Software, Adobe, Intel, IBM, Samsung, and others, first announced in April 2013. Now, so Joe, tell us what browsers work on Blink.
Well, there are several. Now, when I saw that Bill was not feeling well and wasn't going to be able to fill out the show notes the way that he wanted to, I kind of switched this to a roundtable style. So hopefully everybody can get in and talk about what they know, where they know something. So the first one that I had wanted to talk about was Google Chrome, which is my browser of choice just for...
Boo!
Get it out of here!
And I don't have to worry about web pages not working. Now, I know the problems with Google tracking everything, but this is the world we live in, and I think it's just going to get worse from here.
The reason web pages don't work on other browsers is that Google has preempted the code, and they are not using the standards that were set out. Everything else is
surprising at all.
Everything else is using all the standards. That this is why pages won't load on Firefox. It'll load on Chrome because Chrome broke the whole code.
But then everybody kind of jumped on the bandwagon and said, okay, since everybody's using Chrome, and even the biggest, I mean, the browser that 900% of the people that are using a computer are using Windows. What's Windows come with? Well, it comes with Edge. What's Edge built on, Bill? Well, it's built on Chromium, isn't it? So let's just develop all of our software and optimize for the Chromium engine, which is Blink.
That's a recent change, though, the switch to the Chromium backend. So, I mean, before that, Internet Explorer didn't really.
But I'm not even sure what that ran on.
Yeah, its own thing.
Yeah.
Now, I use Chrome because just of how useful it is. I do use several extensions with Chrome, which I think add a lot to the functionality. I also know that several of the extensions that I use have been banned over the years for various nefarious reasons. They are basically like malware, adware, or whatever, and you don't find that out until later on, or it starts out not being that way, and then they make changes to it that make it that way. Some of the extensions that I use are an equalizer to equal out all the noise. Dark mode extension, which I no longer need because dark mode is now built into Chrome. PIA extension for when I cannot use a VPN for absolutely everything. I will make sure that it's available to use in Chrome. Plex speed extension, which really works with like all videos. So you can like up to double the play speed of videos, but it does interfere with YouTube speed control. Now I also use like uBlock Origin, which I know makes me a bad person because it takes money away from creators. Now there are others in there that I also use, but these are the ones that I use the most. I also use Chrome Remote Desktop, which is a recent thing for me, and I was going to include a lot more about it in the show notes and talk about it this show. But really, thinking about it from the last time I talked about it, there really isn't anything that I want to add. Now, Chrome is also the basis for like Chrome OS, which is on Chromebooks. So it's like user share has gone up, I think like 63% of all browsers that are regularly in use are Chrome or something like that. Now, for me, I also use like Chrome on my phone, and that's simply because my history from anywhere that I use Chrome is automatically on my phone, and my bookmarks just get moved over to my phone with it, so I don't have to worry about also adding them in there.
So, Chrome was the browser that I initially first got into. Everybody had Internet Explorer back in the day. Everybody hated Internet Explorer back in the day. Some people who are a bit more on the bleeding edge went on over to Netscape Navigator, and then from then on went on to Mozilla Firefox. Me, I was kind of really. It was around the time when Chrome came out. Back in 2008, 2009, something like that, that I got into it. And I thought it was brilliant. I liked the way that it was quick. I liked the way that the syncing, the bookmarks, everything like that. I thought it was fantastic. And then I did the same thing as you. Like, I used it because then not long after that, Android came. And, Chrome was kind of, really pushed to the fore as the browser. And I liked the syncing and all that sort of stuff. And it's grown massively to the extent that I would say that it's the Internet Explorer of our times. It's got such a massive market share. And even the ones that, even if you haven't got Google Chrome, you've probably got a Blink-based browser. So, it's got a almost monopoly, As time went on, and as I started getting more and more into free and open source and the concepts of free and open source, I started finding ideological problems, shall we say, with Chrome and the tracking and all that sort of stuff. And I know I've heard the usual things. So if you've got nothing to hide, then what's the worry? Or, you're going to get tracked anyway, so what's the point? as I said, it just didn't sit right with me, and so maybe about 7, 8 years ago, I moved off from Chrome. I do now. I got I was, as I mentioned in my innards. I used to have a sorry, it's the wandering. Sorry, I used to have a Pixel 7, and on the Pixel 7, however much you try, you can't get rid of Chrome. It's always kind of there. It's always the default. It's not as difficult to change browser like it is changing Edge on Windows 11. You know, trying to change that is like, you have to sacrifice a goat or something at midnight, on a full moon. It's the only way you're going to manage to get rid of that default. But yeah, it's not actually as performant as it used to be. It seems to have got a lot more bloated. It does take quite a lot of memory in a way that it didn't in the past. And so I didn't kind of see any compelling reason to move back. I suppose if I used
Yeah.
a Chromebook, then I remember my son got a Chromebook and I put Firefox on it, and then felt like, right, it was kind of like, why did I bother getting a Chromebook if I was going to put Firefox on it? You know what I mean? You know, so that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, I think it's more of but yeah, it's not as good as it was, I feel.
Bill and I were actually having this conversation earlier about the early days of Chrome and Firefox, which is a little bit older. But there was a time when I would switch back and forth between Chrome and Firefox over a several month period because Chrome would start hogging all your RAM or really slowing down your processor or whatever else. And then you'd switch over to Firefox for a while because it was currently working better and more streamlined. And then something would happen and they'd make a change to Firefox and it would end up not working correctly. And so you'd switch back to Chrome because they would have fixed whatever issue it was that was causing it to eat up so much RAM. Now, most of my machines these days have a minimum of 8 gigabytes of RAM, and usually 16 or 32, so I don't worry about that as much. Now, I will say that recently, I don't know if it's a change at Facebook itself or if it's a change on Chrome, but Facebook has been running like dog crap, just super slow and really annoying on any machine that I'm on, other than my phone, which granted for Facebook is not using Chrome. So I might switch back to Firefox for a while and see how well that works. But that might be a bit of a pain at this point, considering how engulfed I am in the Google experience.
Let me ask you this though: if Google didn't drop the sync support for Chromium, would you use that instead of Google Chrome proper?
No, I do talk about that some in the Chromium section coming up. So
Okay.
let's save that for just a second and get out the rest of what anybody else wants to talk about on Chrome. Going once,
How about you, Moss?
twice.
Oh,
Oh.
I mean, Moss. I mean,
Moss's answer is I don't use it.
yeah. I mean, that's just. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. And let's move on. shall we?
I admire people that stick to their. I really
Absolutely.
do. I admire
Oh,
people that stick
I'd
to.
love to be that. I'd love to be able to do that, but sometimes you just get tired, and I know that this is always an issue with fast stuff. Free and open source. You do have to deal with the general jank and sometimes randomness, and like we've been
Yeah.
experiencing today with the audio. And there's other times when you're just like, look, you know what? I just want to get this sorted, and I can't be bothered organizing this, that, and the
Yeah.
other. Blah blah blah. Can we just do it? And actually, interestingly, the MacBook that I bought is the only device where if I need just to get something done, I can be sure it's going to work on. I mean, obviously the Windows machine won't, because the Windows is even worse than Linux. At least Linux you can vaguely figure stuff out. Windows is just an amorphous mess. Not, and this is, by the way, not a. I'm not advocating the use of Mac OS. I've just found it refreshing that I don't actually have to do any farting around to get just simple things to work. Anyway, but
Yeah,
I'm
as
suppose I'm
long as
ranting
it's
a bit
simple
now.
things.
Oh yeah, only simple things. I'm not talking about like anything that actually of any import. I'm just talking about like why will my bank website not work on anything else type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I'm ranting on, and this is only the beginning. Oh dear.
We was
Right,
just
right,
telling
right.
everybody about your love for Chrome and Chromium, Moss, and use it every day. He's on
BS
the.
detector. Beep, 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 beep.
All right. Well, Chromium. Now Chromium is basically, I don't want to call it like a fork of Chrome, but essentially what they did in the beginning
It's
of
the other way
Chromium was
around, actually.
Yeah, I was
was
gonna
they
say, isn't
And I
Chromium
don't
was the
even.
original project, and then they added the
right.
proprietary stuff to make it Chrome.
There's just bits sitting on
Okay,
top
but
that are Chrome.
the point that I was getting to was that Chromium is Chrome with all of the proprietary stuff removed. Hopefully,
We hope.
we hope. Yeah.
Well,
Okay. So now I used to use Chromium a lot, especially back when I was doing a lot more with like the Raspberry Pis and SPCs. And there was really no version of Chrome for ARM available at the time. Now it did you like I was saying, it used to allow you to use your Chrome account and load all the same extensions and import all the bookmarks and everything else. I have not used it in a while, and that from what I remember, that changed a couple of years ago. They made it so that Chromium and Chrome could not use, or maybe you could use the same account, but it wouldn't load everything in or something
they
like that.
removed their Chrome functionality to sync all of your bookmarks and your extensions to your Google
History,
account, your
extensions.
history and
Okay.
everything, because they wrongly assumed that everybody that was building a browser off of Chromium was using their backup technology instead of their own, which was absolutely not the case, because every single one of them, Vivaldi and Edge, right from the very beginning, used their own sync technology. So it was just I mean, it was some imagined use case where they thought they had to keep that locked away so people wouldn't use the Chromium thing to make some other browser. But that's the reason they did that.
Now I know that there's also like a Chromium OS, but I really don't know how far along that is, and I've never used it. But I'm assuming that it's a drop-in replacement for like Chrome OS if you're looking for
yeah,
something
but
that
it's a right ball ache to try and get to
Yeah,
use. I've
yeah.
tried it.
Okay.
they came out with Chromium in 2009, so it's been around for a while. Chromium OS.
Don't they have a
Yeah.
Chrome OS
Okay.
Flex that you can
Yeah,
install
they
on?
have that now. They have that now.
Okay.
So the idea is that, as I understand it, Chromium OS is the best way that I understood it was like Android. You have the Android open source project, and then you have Android as it comes out from each of the manufacturers, right? And so the Chromium has that same kind of model. You've got you've got Chromium as a browser, Chromium OS, and these become Chrome and Chrome OS later. Now, yes, you can. It is possible to install Chromium OS on a device, but it is I found it a real ball ache, frankly. Now, yes, again, recently Google has come out with Chrome Flex, because basically I don't know if they've thought in this way, but it seems like they've looked at and goes, well, plenty of people have got old machines that they're getting rid of, but hey, we will give you this operating system that you can use on your 5, 6, 7-year-old laptop, and it will make it good, just like new again.
It's
Reminds me
called
of another
Toby.
operating system. Yeah, yeah. That
And you
the
won't have to learn Linux.
yeah, exactly. And so now I've seen a couple of reviews of it, and it's kind of what you'd expect, actually. It's a desktop which isn't optimized for any particular hardware. It just works on everything. It doesn't have the same driver support that Linux does. And so I think people have tried Chrome OS Flex on certain machines, and they're supposed to be supported, but like the Wi-Fi doesn't work or something, and that's a big thing. I mean, you've got a device like that which depends on an internet connection.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's the best way to kind of think about it. I like Chromium. Chromium, the first one that I used to get it off Google Chrome was Chromium, because I could still use my Google account and syncing and stuff like that. And then it's only when I decided that I wasn't going to use a Google account anymore. Not that I managed to get rid of it, because I've still got bloody Android after all. But so it's like Godfather 3, isn't it? However much you try, they suck you back in. So yeah, it misses some of the proprietary things like DRM and codecs and things, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I actually have that listed in some of the notes here about the features that it lacks in comparison to Chrome, which is the automatic browser updates, API keys for some Google services, the browser syncing of history, the Widevine DRM, and then there are certain like audio codecs and video codecs that it doesn't come with. And then it's also supposed to be missing the tracking for usage and the crash reports.
I mean, one of the things I like a lot about, oh, let me rephrase that. If I've got a progressive web app, I always use either Chromium or a Chromium-based browser, because it just works a
Yeah.
lot better. Ironically, actually, I know we haven't got to it yet. The best I found for progressive web apps was Microsoft Edge, actually, which surprised me. I don't know. Maybe it's just
We'll get to
I
that
don't
later,
know.
Magic.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we'll get to that. Yeah, we'll
Well,
get to that.
as a continuation of the discussion of Chromium, it is one of the browsers that I used to use to basically have a second installation of Chrome so that I could use a different account for different things and not have the two attached to each other. That and I used to use Canary. I don't know if you guys ever used Canary, but it was the Chrome beta version. They're
Actually, it was more
testing.
than that, wasn't it? Because there was Chrome Beta, and then there was Chrome Canary, wasn't it? It's like the dev version, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So there were some things that would occasionally end up broken on it, but it was also another great way to have a separate browser that was completely separated and had its own accounts attached to it. That's really all I got on Chromium. What about you, Bill? I see you got some stuff there.
Well, I think Chromium is like my go-to for very specific purposes. I have a couple of use cases because, well, okay, whether you like it or not, many of the projects that we use test on, and therefore sometimes functionality is more reliable when you use a Chromium browser for certain tasks. Nextcloud, for example, seems to work better with Chromium, and the software, well, the web-based software that we use to create the video stream for the show seems to run better on Chromium-based browser, just because that was what the developer tested on, or what he optimized for, and in his opinion, and I have to believe him because he would know more than I would, that the Chromium audio video stack is much more mature and usable for stuff like this than Firefox is. So what I'll usually do is I'll create, we talked about before, Chromium has a good infrastructure, good tooling for creating progressive web apps, which is something that Firefox just kind of blew off some time ago. It was built into Firefox. You can get extensions to make that work now, but it is a right ball ache to get up and going, and the reliability of them, it's something you're constantly updating, constantly tweaking with. With Chromium, it just works, and it creates an application. It's sitting right there in your application menu on the desktop, and it creates a shortcut on your desktop as well. So, I mean, there is that. So I have web apps, progressive web apps made for each one of the show's control rooms for Video Ninja, and they're completely. The other thing about that is they all have their own browser profile, meaning they're saving all the caching and all of the settings that you do on these particular browser instances. They're siloed off to each one of these. That's the other benefit to doing that, because sometimes you'll have some things set up in a way for one use case that might not be the best way of handling it on another. So it works good for, in my case, mostly Video Ninja and then Nextcloud. That's the two things I've got running on Chromium right here in front of me, and then everything else is on Firefox. But yeah, that's just what it is for me. It's just those few things that seem to run better. Look, I'm as much of an open source, if not more of an open source sort of vigilante than most people. You know, I will use the open source thing, the thing that is developed in an ethical manner. I will use that if I can before anything else, but I'm just pragmatic enough to know that I've still got to get this thing done. And if it works better over here on this other thing, then, well, it just works better over here on this other thing. So I'm going to use that other thing, because in my mind, especially when it comes to these shows, and the reason I started using Chromium for the Video Ninja is it just, I think that creating this show, it works, and creating this show for the people that enjoy watching this show, you know, has got to mean more to me than my own desire to use nothing but Firefox. I mean, that's not me condescending anybody. That's just kind of how I worked it out in my head, because, to be honest, Firefox came with Linux Mint, and it was the only thing I had installed, and I wasn't gonna do anything else, no matter what anybody told me. But it, you know, once I tried it and saw how good it was, I was like, you know, it's, at some point you got to say, yeah, it is what it is. Let's use the tools that we have available to us. And the truth is, it is open source. You don't have to put any bookmarks on it that's going to lead Google to all of your. And if what you believe about Google is true anyway, then it doesn't really matter, because they own you anyway. So there you have it. But like I said, Chromium for me has a very specific use case. I do not use Chrome anymore. I was using Chrome for a while there, and then when I updated to the latest version of Mint, I didn't go through the process of installing the PPAs or whatever it is that when you install the deb. I just didn't do it, because between Chromium and Firefox, I'm able to get everything done. So, and then there are others that we'll get to here in a minute. But yeah, that's my nickel's worth of free opinion that nobody asked for.
Okay, let's try a different browser. Microsoft Edge. Edge was initially built in 2014 with Microsoft's own proprietary browser engine, Edge HTML, and their Chakra JavaScript engine. And then in late 2018, they switched to Chromium/Blink engine.
Was a wise choice.
Yeah, it really was. Microsoft Edge, what can you say about that? It's the most used browser for installing Chrome.
It's a good browser. I'm sorry, but it is.
No, it is. Now, I use this for work because some of the sites that I go to require it. Now, I still use Chrome where I can, but, you know, this is installed, and it does come up quite often because, well, Windows wants you to, and it's hard-coded in a lot of places, and you just plain can't get rid of it. It works as far as I can tell, but, you know, I haven't seen anything exceptional about it. The Chromium backend, you know, really does give it a familiar feel, but it is so heavily skinned that I'm not sure that is much of an impression, or if it's just because I know that it's Chromium on the back end. But like I said, I click certain links at work and it will come up, and then there's other links where it says we must be using Chrome to make this work, so it automatically will go from or we must be using Edge to make this work, so it will automatically go to Chrome. Now I think 10 and 11 both have Edge installed, but then they also have Internet Explorer installed, because for the longest time there were some things that just plain would not run on Edge when they were first developing it. And so some things would end up defaulting back to Explorer. So, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, the thing about having IE still in is all about the backwards compatibility, because some old applications are still using like IE guts to display certain things or to interact with the web in some archaic ways.
Yeah, I've seen that with NHS systems. We still have Internet Explorer for a couple of the reporting, blood reports and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I'm sure when the next time there is a big migration and change, you'll all go to Edge or Chromium or whatever backend. But till then, yeah. So it's always kind of hidden on, it's always there. You just never know it until you come across one of these websites that needs it.
Yeah. And that's why when you install the same thing when you install like Wine on Linux, it's got this invisible IE browser sort of replacement, and that it serves the exact same purpose. It's there so that an application has a workable path if it needs to access and display web-based content. So there's that.
Yeah.
But I've got Edge installed. Do I use it very much? When it comes to like Microsoft-y stuff, like Game Pass for the kids, and dealing with their school accounts, which are all Microsoft-based, Outlook and all that, and I don't even bother futzing around with anything else when it comes to that. I'll just get Edge out because I know that's going to work, and it does. The thing about Edge, what I've noticed, is it gives you the benefits of Chrome and the Google and the Microsoft ecosystem, because it'll sync to both of them if you want it to. By default, it just syncs to your Microsoft account, but you can turn on the
tracked by both of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
What difference does it make? One's selling to the other anyway, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can turn on the sync functionality in both of those.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I would agree with that, actually.
So I could see how some people would probably like that, because if you've got this, if you need both of these ecosystems, but you want to have one place where you can consume both of them, I think it would be a nightmare. But I'm sure I'm not the use case that Edge had in mind anyway. So, but like I said, I've got it. Oh, and it's on my Windows VMs, because I don't. The Windows VMs have very specific purposes, and I really don't need to fill it up with a lot of software just to do what I need done with those and then move on. So it's on there, and it's okay. It runs great. It's about as bloated as you would expect out of a browser that's basically two browsers in one. I mean, yeah, it's basically Chrome on the bottom, but that Microsoft adds a lot of bits to it to make it something consumable in their space, which you wouldn't have got away with that in the old days. If you'd have made a browser that was that bloated, it would have ran like garbage and people wouldn't have liked it. But now your average machine's got, I think the cheap ones at Walmart right now are like 8 gig of RAM and 4 cores and what have you. So it's not as much of an issue, and I think it gets taken advantage of quite a bit. But yeah, that's my Edge.
So as I was saying, I have a specific use case for it as well, and that's the progressive web apps. As you know, it seems to work quite well in that. I actually did used to use the Edge before the Chromium change because it was actually very good for inking. So I remember around that time I was buying a house and I was getting loads of PDFs and having to sign loads of documents electronically and stuff like that. And it worked really well with that, actually. And even when they moved over to the Chromium backend, there was a little drop off in that kind of performance, but now they've got back up to where they were. And so it's ironically, I actually use it for a bit of PDF management. It's got a good PDF viewer. It's got a good, cut and paste stuff. As I said, signing things seems to work all right. I don't like the fact that I'm using it for that, but I feel a bit dirty when I do it. But it does work quite well. The performance is reasonable. I would say, as I said, it's been a while since I've used Chrome properly, so maybe maybe my expectations are a bit off, but it seemed reasonable. I mean, if especially when it's working on Windows, I mean, if Microsoft can't optimize their browser for their own operating system and the hardware with their hardware vendors, then I mean, I don't know what else they should just go home otherwise, isn't it? The syncing, as Bill mentioned, works really well. Parental controls actually works quite well as well if you've got it on kids' devices. The mobile apps, at least for Android anyways, again are okay, It is apparently the worst for privacy. I mean, it will literally send all your keystrokes to Microsoft in telemetry, not just like, the actual sentences or the things you're searching for, but literally the M and the E and the T or whatever. And yeah, Microsoft make it really difficult for you to uninstall it, which actually I'm a bit. If it had a larger market share, I'm sure, Monopolies Commission or whatever would have something to say about that. But because it doesn't, I don't think, they're that bothered. But yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, if anybody's ever tried trying to uninstall Edge or just even changing your default browser from Edge to whatever, there's a lot of hoops you need to jump through. And it's not like this is unknown stuff. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there explaining, how much of a problem this is. And Microsoft just don't care. Which, well, I suppose, newsflash.
Microsoft Edge, the Hotel California of browsers.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, newsflash, $1 billion company wants to make more money and doesn't want you to use other people's stuff. I mean, who would have guessed it, eh? Yeah, so that's all I've got to say about Edge.
Thinking back to the times when I was using nothing but Windows, and then Netscape come along, and that was better. And I installed that, but you never had this concept like we do over here on Linux, where you install one thing and get rid of the other. You installed this new thing, but you didn't even bother trying to get rid of the old thing, which in those days was Internet Explorer, because it wouldn't let you. You could go into the Windows setting and enable and disable Windows features, and Internet Explorer would be one of them, but then a whole lot of things would stop working correctly.
I thought that was Netscape Navigator because they also use that to navigate your file system, and that's why it's so integrated that you could not get rid of it in order to use something else, which is why Microsoft got sued for monopolistic practices.
Well, it's another problem with bugs and with viruses because Microsoft Internet Explorer was linked right down into the depths of your system.
Yeah,
it's like root level from a Linux perspective, and if anything gets in, it gets into everything.
Because you didn't have a delineation of system layers and application layers the way we do now, which I guess you could argue if you're still installing deb packages, you're still sort of vulnerable in the same way. But yeah, I mean, IE was down there in the system. That's why you had to get into the system settings to, and you didn't really get rid of it. You just disabled it, And then other browser, and you didn't even really have this concept of other browsers. I remember using America Online in the early 2000s, and it came with a browser, I suppose you could say. God knows what that was built on. But it did have that concept within their little gated garden sort of experience. You did have a web browser, but it really, you had to go out of your way to go outside of their little ecosystem there. But then when stuff started coming along, I don't know, it seemed like you were a little bit more vulnerable by using some of that stuff, like the Netscape. And then I remember when Mozilla came along, you had the Mozilla browser, which it had the browser and the email client, and I think like a chat client. It was all
That's called SeaMonkey now.
Yeah, it's been continued on as the SeaMonkey project, and by golly, it still looks exactly the way the Mozilla project did back then. And of course, Netscape was kind of the same thing. It felt like Mozilla was kind of a beta for Netscape or something. And then Firefox comes along, and I think that was just browser.
Well, Netscape came first, and then AOL bought Netscape, and it got ported to Mozilla. Anyhow, let's link onto another browser, shall we?
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
All right. It's Opera that's up next. I have tried to use this in the distant past. Opera, yeah. When I did a lot of browser hopping, it was supposed to be more secure and give more freedom. I will say that it has provided some impetus for improving other browsers. A lot of innovation came out of Opera, including like the speed dial, pop-up blocking, reopening recently closed pages, private browsing, tabbed browsing, ad blocking built right in, and tracking blocking. I think it was the pop-up blocking and tracking blocking that first got me to use it. And also in 2016, I went back to using it for a little while because they added a VPN to the browser, a web proxy really, but that's what I use when I use the PIA VPN on Chrome. And that was appreciated at the time because they were the first ones to really do it. But I didn't stick with it real long, and I don't remember why. I think it just wasn't as useful as
part of it
Firefox
was
and
if you were using the free version, you had a quarter of your screen taken up by an ad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you had to pay them. I think it was $30 or $35 to get the pro version. But then they got bought by a large Chinese company, and
dun dun dun.
The company dumped the developer team, which went on to produce Vivaldi as a response.
So I've often gone back to Opera a couple of times. I've used it. I've used it on my desktops. I've used it on mobile. They actually had a really good mobile browser called Opera Touch, which was optimized for one-handed use in the times when phones could be one-handed, without the size, unless your hands, now you can only one-hand them if your hands are the size of a gorilla, I think.
You got 9 fingers.
Yeah. A few too many cousin marriages. Anyway, and I can say that, mate. Cousin marriages are all around my family, mate.
Yeah, I got the same one Joe's got, and it's large.
Yeah, and so so anyway, back to the point. So I did quite like it. I also like that it had integration with WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, so it was kind of, it was very easy to link your WhatsApps and Facebooks to it. And then it just stopped being there. It just, thank God for that. I just stopped using it, and then recently, when I heard they were going all AI and integrating ChatGPT,
Cryptocurrency and
I tried it again, and actually a couple of the podcasts were done on that Opera One dev browser. Obviously, in the intervening time, the change in ownership that Moss was talking about happened, and so I didn't really kind of take that into account. And then when I did look into it, I thought to myself, you know what? It's bad enough I'm selling all my data to Google and Microsoft and whatever. The Chinese Communist Party is probably a step too far, even for me. And so I got rid of it. But Joe's right, actually, in that a lot of the innovations, if you want to put it that way, that we now see as standard in browsers, started off with Opera. As you say, private browsing, tab browsing, ad blocking, stuff like that, the speed dial. So, it's been an influential browser, and I suppose this leads on quite well to the next browser we're going to talk about, which was Vivaldi, which is basically when Opera did get bought by that big Chinese company and dumped the developer team, they made Vivaldi, and the emphasis on it is features, 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 and more features. So, you can live inside Vivaldi if you wanted to. It's got mail, it's got VPNs, it's got all the Chrome extensions that you can use, but it's calendars, all sorts of things. It has some privacy features, and ad blocking and tracker blocking and stuff. Still need to make an account, and you have to agree to a EULA, which is a little bit, but at the same time, it works really quite well. I've moved over to it actually, on a lot of my things. I'm trying to use it as my main browser, and it works quite well. I don't know if it works quite well because
there's a lot more of a learning curve to it than other browsers, though.
Yeah, you do have to spend a bit of time. I mean, I often wonder actually if the devs wouldn't be, but it might be a good project for the devs to make, this almost like a Chrome OS competitor, because it's almost an operating system in of itself. The amount of features that are there, all sorts of things that you can do. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're not going to do that, but so and because it's got a Chrome backend, all the extensions work from the web store and stuff. So I quite like it. I don't know if I'll keep it, but it works. It works all right. Have you guys used it?
Negative. I've heard good things about it.
I've tried it off and on, and it just I look at it, and the amount of new stuff to learn just boggles me.
Yeah, there is a bit of that. And I remember
it is the default browser on Farron.
Yeah, that's the thing I was going to mention. That it seems there's certain distros that seem to be putting it as their default browser. Now, who else? Is it Manjaro?
Manjaro, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Dave,
which was an interesting choice, but
yeah, I thought that was an interesting choice as well. But yeah, anyway, I suppose the next browser is another one that I know a little bit about. So if it's okay, I'll start. So Brave is privacy and crypto and FOSS. So a lot of the people that are involved in the making of Brave have been involved in free and open source. If I remember correctly, Martin Wimpress, the one who made Ubuntu Mate and then worked for Canonical, he was quite involved in the development of Brave. And the idea is that this is a completely privacy-based browser. Ad blocking is on by default. Trackers are blocked. They've got this thing called Brave Shields. It's got syncing but without an account, which I think is quite cool actually. So you haven't got like your things on a central server somewhere. It's kind of almost like a mesh network type of thing. So in that sense, it's quite cool. I suppose you could think of it as like a private Chromium, but that's not 100% accurate, but it's a good way of thinking about it. I moved it. I tried moving to it as my main browser on all my devices. I just, a blanket. This was about a year or two ago. there's just that bit of jank, that kind of not working at certain points, which is so common of so many Linux and free and open source software projects. That means that I can't rely on it the same way. It works quite well with the progressive web apps, but only on mobile it seems. If you're using it on the desktop, and especially if you're using the Snap package, then getting a PWA to work is, at least I couldn't do it. I mean, I know I'm a noob, but I couldn't get it working. The crypto part of it is, so obviously if you're ad blocking and tracker blocking by default, how are you going to how are creators going to make any money? And so their innovative solution to this was to invent their own token, the BAT token, which you then give to websites and things that you want to support. And then they made a wallet, which was then part of the browser. I have never used it. I don't know if it's a proper way of monetizing anything. Whatever your thoughts on crypto, adding another coin is hardly gonna make it go to the moon.
Well, there was a
So
time when everyone was getting all excited about crypto, but we've had too many
yeah,
scams for that to hang on.
yeah, everybody was getting excited about crypto, and then they lost 10 grand. Not that I'm looking at myself here. Um, but yeah, I mean, as I said, it does work. It works quite well on mobile. As I said, a bit janky on the desktop, and the progressive web apps thing is a problem for me personally, because there are a couple of medical progressive web apps that I kind of need. Either of you guys, it's always had very good ratings when it comes to privacy and security. So when you go on these YouTube channels or websites which then rank browsers, it always comes up quite high up. Have either of you guys used Brave?
I've just never been able to wrap my head
Nope.
around the concept that you can take the Chromium engine and then make it into this thing that is safe in that way. I mean, I'm sure I'm wrong, but it's like, and then all the crypto crap on top of that. It's like, making your breakfast in the bathroom. It doesn't make sense to me. I just haven't been able to wrap my head around it.
I mean, the crypto stuff I've completely ignored from the beginning. I've never even
But I mean, why
really
go that
engaged.
route? You know what?
I
That's a
know it
strange
doesn't make sense.
choice for a project that is. I mean, their whole shtick is to separate you, the user, from all of the bad players in the
I
technical
mean,
world.
I think that it's a case of techies not realizing the real world is different to the techies world. Yeah, so
Yeah.
crypto might be a thing that maybe enthusiasts might be interested into, but it's not what normal
Yeah.
people do
No,
generally.
if I remember right, like you could buy the crypto on there, but you could also earn the crypto on there
Yeah.
by browsing, liking, doing certain things. So you could get it for
Yeah,
free. And then you could decide where that crypto went in order to support developers. So it was a good idea, even if it only worked for a small percentage of the population wanting to use it. It still added some value to the developers. So the issue then got to be just with crypto itself. At the time they did it, there wasn't as many crypto scams that had been floating around, and there weren't all the NFT scams and everything else that's has sort of scared people away from the entire digital currency market. But I mean, also with the variability of the value of crypto that has been going on for a while now, and it mostly being down, but that's your regular stock markets too. But it just doesn't seem like it's adding that value anymore.
Maybe they're just gonna quietly try to separate themselves from all that. That'll go down
well,
as one of
wait,
those.
Well, it's not like they're making a huge amount of money from it, put it that way.
No.
So, I mean, they're probably going to have to, if they want to monetize it, they're going to have to think of another way of doing it.
Does anybody remember what their coin was called? Because they
Bat.
had their own coin for it.
Bat.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
that
then.
being
Like
said,
the
I've never
Brave
actually
attention
installed it.
token or something?
Yeah, brave
Or was it
attention
Brave
token. maybe.
appreciation token or attention
Ah,
token? I don't
I don't-
remember.
I don't know. Anywho, shall we move on to Amazon Silk? So this is a browser that uses a split architecture where some of the processing is performed on Amazon servers to improve web page loading performance. Based on open source Chromium, it uses Blink and V8 engines. It's on the Fire tablet, it's on the Fire TV, and on the one Fire phone that used to exist many years ago. It's just a bit pants, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
I
you're
mean,
going to have to explain that terminology there.
okay,
Do not-
rubbish.
Okay.
It's just,
You wear rubbish for pants?
well, I mean, okay, I want to point out that in the UK, pants means underwear, not your trousers.
Ah,
Yeah, it's male underwear is
I
pants,
think I
wear
knew
not
rubbish
male
for
that.
underwear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, it's just pants. It's just rubbish.
Oh, okay. Well, I use this occasionally on my Fire tablet. It doesn't seem to be any different, except that it doesn't have all the plugins that you can use in something real.
I'll tell you what it's most similar to. It's most similar to the AOSP browser. Yeah? If anybody's
So-
used the AOSP browser on Lineage or something like that, right, that's what it's most similar
That's
to. So
really, really bad.
Now do you understand why I just put just pants?
that is awful.
Oh,
I always got the idea because I've never had a Fire tablet. I do have a lot of Fire TVs and Fire sticks. And yeah, there it is. And it's really there for the off times when you need a regular browser, because the Fire devices are really not meant to consume the internet that way, are they? They're meant
to consume Amazon services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The Fire Stick, the only times I've ever used the browser on the Fire Stick is so that I could download Kodi.
exactly.
or something.
Exactly. Yes. And then I
Yeah.
found out what the download, what was it I started using?
Downloader or something like that.
Yeah, something
Something
that had
like
the
that.
browser built in, and then that was the
Yeah,
end.
and had
That was it for Silk.
Yeah, it was a blue icon, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
a blue folder icon. Yeah.
Because it would keep track of that, and then it would manage the downloads, and then once you installed the APK, you could get rid of it. And
Yeah,
And-
exactly. So,
but then
yes,
once Jellyfin came along, Kodi was out the door. And Jellyfin you can get on the Fire TV store.
So anyway, as you can see, I was 100% accurate with my description of just pants.
Okay, let's move on to KDE Falcon, just because we're already well over 3 hours, or close to.
and we all want to get off of Majid's pants.
Yeah, we don't want to be in Majid's pants.
Well, Falcon is an interesting one
Yeah.
because it's just so that you understand that Qt Web Engine is kind of a wrapper around the Blink engine, just to
Around the Chromium browser core, yeah.
And so I don't know what that means exactly in terms of functionality, but there you go. Take it away, Moss.
Well, it is free and open source, so to speak. Both KOS and OpenMandriva LX use Falcon as their default browser. Falcon provides several icon sets and other elements to match the native look and feel of users' desktops' operating systems. Some additional features of the browser include the integration of history, web feeds, and bookmarks in a single location, the ability to take a screenshot of the entire page, and an Opera-like speed dial homepage. It's reported to consume fewer system resources than the major general-purpose browsers like Firefox and Chrome. Falcon uses the Qt cross-platform application framework and offers a built-in ad block. By default, this ad blocker whitelists the web page of Falcon's main search engine, DuckDuckGo. A portable, no-installation version for Windows platforms exists, and Falcon is also distributed in the portable apps format.
That's interesting. But, I mean, I wonder if it's fair to say that it's lighter weight when, in order to install it, I wonder if you gotta, like, install half of the KDE dependencies.
Well, they were talking about the weight in terms of system resources, not in terms of how much space it takes up on the
Right,
drive.
but I mean, is it because that it's only using things when it needs to and it doesn't lap the load? I don't know. It'd be interesting to compare it in a KDE environment as opposed to like installing it on GNOME or something like that, and see if it is the same in terms of resource usage. That being said, I do have it installed because I find it interesting. It's not worked quite as well for me as just Chromium by itself, and I don't know what that's all about because I don't really understand the Qt web engine thing. But it is well integrated into the KDE desktop because obviously it was the continuation of Cupzilla.
Cupzilla, yeah.
Cupzilla, which was a good browser. Leaving aside all of the Blink, Gecko conversation, and for a browser that is built into your system, that was a good browser. And then Falcon come along, and it seemed like it was pretty good. The only thing about Falcon is, right about the time you think the project is dead, meaning there hasn't been an update or even a push
blog post,
anything in years, all of a sudden they'll come out with a new release. So it's not real clear how well developed this, or how well patched this browser is, because you get this idea using Linux and hearing people talk about Linux that browsers are one of the most, and must be one of the most aggressively developed pieces of software that we have available to us. But then you look at something like Falcon and it just seems to sit for years, and then all of a sudden here's this huge update. So I don't know.
We will talk about other such down lower, but
Yeah.
I think we just about worn out Blink. Why don't we go on to Gecko?
I can go ahead and read it. So Gecko is the browser engine developed by Mozilla. It is used in the Firefox browser, the Thunderbird email clients, and many other projects. A few examples of browsers that utilize the Gecko web engine include, of course, Firefox, but there are others.
We
anyway.
will get to those after we talk
Yeah.
about Firefox for a while.
Right. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, Firefox, it's my backup browser, and while I don't use it much, I did a lot more in the past. And because of its history and its relation to like Netscape Navigator and the fact that it was not controlled by Microsoft anymore, I used it before I used Chrome because, well, it existed before Chrome, I think. Currently, I use Firefox only for like certain logins that I don't want to attach to my Chrome browser, such as all the mintCast logins for like the streaming and things like that. I don't save the passwords locally for that one, and I don't want to have to be jumping back and forth between profiles on Chrome because I use it for other things during the show. And like also sometimes with Video Ninja, it'll give me trouble on Chrome, and the easiest solution when we're trying to do the show is to jump over to Firefox. Now, I should probably also mention that for a long time I used Iceweasel on the Pi, which was later rebranded back to Firefox. Now, I think I was using it because there was a version that allowed access to the Silverlight Wideband DRM, which allowed access to streaming services. And I think there was also a problem with Chromium at the time, and it was just easier to use Iceweasel. But yeah, and back in the day, I did switch back and forth between Chrome and Firefox a lot, but we already discussed my reasoning behind
And
that.
Iceweasel is no more.
That's
Debian
right.
has
It is.
finally gone full Firefox.
Yeah, if you do apt install for Iceweasel, it just installs Firefox, or at least it used to. Bill?
Well, Firefox is the one that I try to use the most. And that's a relatively recent change for me because I was all in Chrome just because it seemed to work on everything and I just couldn't be bothered. But then when I started getting into the community with the podcasting and all of that, it came, well, I always had Firefox installed. I always kept an eye on it. I always wanted it to be better. I just, for one reason or another, I was putting off switching to it completely. And then once I did, it became clear that a lot of the reasons that I was not using it full time were probably a little overstated because it does work and it works performantly. And 99% of my use cases, there's just this couple of things where Chromium has just proven to be slightly more reliable, but for the most part, it's been Firefox, and that's our beacon of hope, isn't it? The browser that is open source is, on every level that's possible, that's actually got some real world backing, that's got a prayer and keeping afloat, in this space. So we want Firefox to be everything it can. That's why I buy my VPN service off of them, and I did play around with the Thunderbird thing here recently too, and I've been using Canine Mail on the phone, kind of watching that slowly. It's slowly turning into basically Thunderbird for Android, which that's fine, the name I suppose, but it still kind of works the same way as it always did. The thing I like about using something like Canine Mail is it gives you the ability, which you would think would be a no-brainer, but it only exists in a couple of applications, this ability to completely nuke a inbox in one swell foop, click the box up here and then delete everything, and that does not exist in your Gmail app or your Outlook app or Yahoo or whatever it is you're using. It exists in the Samsung browser that you can get on Galaxy devices and Canine Mail, and that is the only two places I've found that functionality. So I'm kind of, I've been kind of full in on that, and I get that from F-Droid, by the way, too. On my phone, I use a variant, if you will, of Firefox called, it's called Fennec. I'm not sure. I think Moss looked it up once. I'm not sure what the huge difference is between Fenix and Firefox, except that is the version of Firefox that you can get from F-Droid. But I've been using that for, I want to say about 3 years now, and I've not had any problem with it. And that was another thing, kind of forcing myself to start using Firefox on the phone. At first, it was something I had to force myself into, and now I'm just kind of used to it. So,
okay, Wikipedia says Fennec was originally just Firefox for mobile, but it is a Libre version of Firefox.
well, I mean, how much more Libre? What is it about Firefox that's not Libre enough to be on F-Droid, I wonder?
Well, plugin support was initially disabled by default.
That works just fine. I've got, what do you call that one? uBlock Origin. I've got that running.
And apparently the Firefox for Android beta channel is now called Fenix, F-E-N-I-X.
Yeah, the only thing I find on F-Droid is just Fennec, and that's spelled with a C. So there you have it. That's my thing with Firefox.
So, Firefox. I have a love-hate relationship with Firefox, and I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome or what exactly. So I'm a contrarian at heart. I always like to be the one guy doing something a bit weird and a bit different. And so I remember when I was getting fed up of Internet Explorer back in 2006, 7, 8, people told me about Firefox and how it was fantastic and it had all the extensions and all that sort of stuff. And so I promptly decided to use Chrome instead. Because at that point, Chrome was the new thing that was coming out, and this, that, and the other. And I'm so cool. I'm not even with the geek crowd. I'm even cooler than that. Anyway,
At that
so
point, Firefox had about a 38.7% usage, and now
exactly.
it's down to 9 point something.
Yeah, exactly. So that was part of the thing. It was like, I don't want to be part of the 38%. I want to be part of the 4%. That's psychologically not very healthy, that. But anyway, so, and, as I mentioned, I was using Chrome, Chromium, and this, that, and the other. And then as I got more and more into proper Linux, free and open source software and things like that, I thought I'd look back into Firefox, but I was still a bit hesitant because I'd heard that the performance wasn't as good. And then they came out with a version, Firefox Quantum. I remember. I can't remember what version number that was, but apparently they really kind of streamlined it, got rid of the excess bloat and stuff like that. And so I started using that and I thought, actually, this is really good. I mean, I can use it as my Chrome replacement. I'll have my own separate account and it will sync and I'll have my passwords and everything like that. And I have tried to make it my only browser. And it's still on all of my machines. It's still there, but it's there as a backup. It's there because I've got almost 10 years history of using it and bookmarks and passwords and things like that saved in there. But it just doesn't work well enough for me to go to it 100%. I would love to. I really would. But things would just happen, and as we were mentioning already, every web developers just make their websites for Chrome, really, and so Firefox being built on Gecko is always going to be at a bit of a disadvantage, and it'll be stuff that it's not even stuff that you can expect. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, what Joe was mentioning about, using Iceweasel and whatever because about DRM and things like that. That is at least something that you could probably expect, or might be a problem here, or might not be a problem. It's just when you go on to like a normal. I remember the thing that really got me was I was trying to get onto a charity site. I was trying to donate for a charitable cause, and I just couldn't because I was using Firefox, and the website just wouldn't work and wouldn't allow me to make my donation, and I had to download a Chromium-based browser just to do that donation. And it was at that point that I thought, okay, you know what? I'm sorry, I can't live in Firefox on my own. It's on its own. Sorry, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. And so that's why I've been using Brave and Vivaldi and stuff like that. But it's there. It's still there in the background if I need it. So yeah, that's my things. It's like I want to make it my all, but I just can't. It's just not good enough. Sorry.
Okay, well, Firefox is my default and one and only browser. I use the beta in my phones. If a website doesn't load in Firefox, I don't need to use that website. Mozilla has held Gecko exactly to W3C specs, unlike that other web engine. And Firefox includes Mozilla VPN, a rebranding of Moldad, in the hopes of making more money due to losing Google ad revenue in stages, and are looking for more ways to add value to the product, as well as make Firefox features something that their public will feel is worth paying for. And that's about all I got. Why don't we look at another Firefox? Bill?
Well, I mean, there's been some variants of Firefox out there, which are really just, most of them have come and gone, and they were really just kind of, well, you can't take for whatever reason, you cannot take the Gecko engine and just build something else on top of it the way you can with Blink. And that has been kind of a problem in terms of development and making, other browsers. I don't know. Maybe they just don't want you to do that. If you're going to use the Gecko engine, we just want you to use Firefox. But there is one called LibreWolf, which is interesting to me because this one seems like an honest to goodness. It's what a browser like Brave should be doing, where it's stripped out anything that could be used to track a person. It's added a couple of extensions that increase your privacy and your security. It's got DNS over HTTPS enabled by default. It's got HTTPS only enabled by default. It's got container tabs enabled by default, installed and enabled by default, and it opens in a windowed and instead of being maximized, it's windowed, meaning it's like in the center of the screen, because apparently that is another something or other that can be used to track somebody. So it will always open windowed by default, and there is absolutely the syncing mechanism is disabled by default, because that's something else that can be, sort of man in the middle and taking advantage of the user. So this is an honest to goodness browser that is set up to hide every single thing you can do within reason, within the limits of the technology that we have, and it is up to date and well maintained.
And I have added a link in the show notes to LibreWolf.net for you to look that up and spend more attention. We've got a few other Firefox-ish browsers here that we don't really talk anything about. Pale Moon, GNU Ice Cat, and WaterFox.
Quick question. Do these other versions of Firefox, if you want to put it that way, LibreWolf and whatever, do they have mobile browsers? Or are they desktop-based?
Generally, no.
No.
They're just browsers.
Okay. And do they require, can you do syncing in the same way you can do with Firefox?
Most of them. Pale Moon you can't, because it's based on an older version that does not allow for the syncing.
LibreWolf doesn't do it because it's by design trying to keep you separate from all that. So I think it can be enabled, I think it can be used, but it's disabled by default. You could argue that you could take Firefox and you could turn it into LibreWolf by enabling things, disabling things, turning things on and off, and using it in a manner that is similar to the way LibreWolf operates by default. But here is something out there that is set up that way for you, and it works really well.
Okay, well, that's about it for Gecko right now. Why don't we move down to page 21 and talk WebKit? Okay, I'll take it then.
Go right ahead.
WebKit is a browser. I'm not. This is Majid's. A browser engine developed by Apple and primarily used in Safari web browser, as well as all web browsers on iOS and iPadOS. WebKit is also used by the PlayStation consoles, beginning from the PS3, the Tizen mobile operating systems, and the Amazon Kindle ebook reader, Nintendo consoles beginning from the 3DS internet browser, and the discontinued BlackBerry browser. WebKit's C++ application programming interface, API, provides a set of classes to display web content in Windows, and implements browser features such as following links when clicked by the user, managing a back-forward list, and managing a history of pages recently visited. Some examples of web browsers utilizing the WebKit engine include Apple Safari, which someone described as extremely meh.
Yeah. So, okay. So Apple Safari, WebKit, Okay, so WebKit is a fork of, I think it's a fork of some KDE libraries from back in the day. And then it itself was then forked by Google to become Blink. And so it supports, it is the engine and browser of choice on iDevices, and Macs as well. That means on the one hand, it's quite well integrated into the system. It also means that, especially on iPads and iOS devices, the phones, even if you try and use another browser, you will still end up using Safari, because Apple will not allow another browser engine, won't allow Blink or Gecko onto their devices, and so you use say Firefox. You can download Firefox for iOS, but it's just basically a wrapper around WebKit so that you can still access your Firefox account, etc. Same with Chrome actually on iOS as well, etc., etc. So having recently, put my toe into the iOS and Mac OS ecosystems.
You shoved your own leg in.
No, well, yeah, well, I have sold most of the stuff anyway. I put in the show notes that it's extremely meh, and what I mean by that is that it works okay. Nothing's fantastic about it. It's only recently started getting features which were, table stakes in other places. I think they were quite late to the game when it came to web apps. They were late to the game when it came to tab browsers, all sorts of things. It's a very, very middle of the road standard. There's nothing that we. I
It's hard
bet.
for people like us to be excited about something like that.
True.
We can't. We're not. There's no like information channels where they're talking about new features that they're working on and
True.
bugs that they've fixed.
I agree, but I would say that if it wasn't for the fact that it was pre-installed, if it wasn't for the fact that it's the only thing you can use on iOS devices, even if it's in a wrapper, I reckon not a lot of people would use it. Having said that, I would also think that developers probably like it because it makes things more standardized for making your web page. So what this means is that your web page is even less likely to work in Firefox because they're going to try and make it work on a Chromium-based browser, and they'll also try and make it work on a WebKit-based browser. And Gecko, well, who cares? Only 7%. So in that sense, so it's kind of like it's a nefarious actor in Firefox's life. I feel. That's kind of all I've got to say about it, really.
Okay. Well, the only other thing that's currently using WebKit is GNOME Web, also called Epiphany. WebKit used to be used by Midori browser, but it has gone to Blink, although they still maintain a WebKit version. Nobody's using it.
I have tried Midori recently, and it is an absolute fartsicle. It does not seem to work at all. That used to be a good option for lightweight distributions because it was very light and it was extensible and it was interesting, but then now it hardly works at all. It takes forever to start up, and if it does and it crashes, I don't know.
So I tried using GNOME Web recently, because of the fact that it was based on WebKit, and I thought, it's the closest thing you're going to get to Safari on Linux. Whether you'd want Safari on Linux is another question entirely. But yeah, so I tried it out. It's fine. Again, I would say it seemed about. I reckon 5 years ago it would have been up there, but it's 5 years out of date. It's only recently got syncing now with a Firefox account. So
yeah, they haven't even been able to decide. They changed the name to Web in 2012, but you still have to look it up under Epiphany to find it anywhere.
Yeah, so I think that's part of the GNOME. So I've thought that GNOME is trying to become like a free and open source iOS, right? So they have Nautilus, but they changed the name to Files. You know, they have a web browser, Epiphany, they changed the name to Web. You know, things like that. Do you know what I mean? Trying to make it as, you know, noob friendly as possible. But the problem is you can't just call something Web or Files. You have to have a proper code name. Do you know what I
Well,
mean? And that's why there's that issue.
It was originally a fork of Galleon back in December 2002, but all the time that they spent on this, they still don't have it really usable.
Yeah. So
My
it's
opinion.
I mean, yeah.
It's really not. The Linux project the Linux experiment did a video where he tried
Yes,
to
he did.
use.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you see
Yeah.
that? Yeah, he
Yeah, I
tried to
did see
use
that.
GNOME Web or Epiphany. I wish they just called it Epiphany. That was such a
Yeah.
better name. And it just would not. It wouldn't save his place when he would pause in videos or try to move around or whatever on YouTube. It wasn't. It's just not good. So.
No, it's not worth it.
I mean, yeah, it's another one of those things we want it to be better, but I mean, it's a demonstration, I think, if nothing else, in the fact that maintaining a browser is a huge undertaking
Oh
that
yes,
really needs
100%.
the backing of somebody with some, sizable resources.
Well,
And
I mean, Edge is the best example, right? You've got Edge when it came out with its own browser engine, all the might of Microsoft behind it, all the billions of dollars, and then a couple of years later, they're like, okay, we need to switch to Chromium. And I mean, and if Microsoft can't do it, then what hope does anybody else have, really?
If
Anyway,
Microsoft can't do it, they'll buy somebody who already did.
I mean, Microsoft just came to the realization that, it's not worth even trying when we can just take something that's already made, which is good, and just add our little bits on top of it, and Bob's your uncle.
so
Well, let's wrap this puppy up here.
Oh, yeah.
Other things going on. Firefox also implements safe browsing, a proprietary protocol from Google used to exchange data related with phishing and malware protection. Some of the more open source versions, such as LibreFox, strip this and other proprietary features out. And I think Joe asked if we use anything different for our mobile browsers.
Now,
Joe?
mostly everybody kind of covered this in line already, but I use Chrome on my phone because, yeah, Android device is easier that way. And I used to load a second browser. I couldn't find what it was called, though, but it was one of the ones that was meant to be private. And when I did, I only used that when I didn't want a search attached to Google, and I didn't want any of the history kept, because a lot of those browsers just automatically didn't save history, and
so what, like start page or
wasn't
something?
attached. Yeah, it wasn't attached to an account or anything, and that was the whole point of my using it.
So basically for porn, right? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Porn. Yep. It was
I'm
for
just
porn.
joking.
Well, for me,
Anywho.
Firefox Beta has yet to fail me on my phone. Londoner replied early in the show that on his Android he uses the DuckDuckGo browser, which is also available for iOS, Mac, and Windows, but not Linux yet.
I've heard there's some issues with DuckDuckGo browser. I don't know what. I just remember seeing a couple of videos saying about how it was a bit of an epic fail. But anyway,
They were selling some it was gathering some kind of metrics that was being used or sold or whatever, and that really,
There's also
Yeah.
just been controversy around DuckDuckGo for the last couple of years, off and on, because of the backends that they use and the deals that they have, made on some of the metrics that they are selling.
yeah.
I mean, I've discussed as well, but basically, I started off on Chrome because of Android, basically, and the synchronization worked quite well. Now I'm on I have three browsers on most of my devices. Firefox for emergencies, Brave, and recently Vivaldi. And I generally use Vivaldi now for most things. I suppose I'm using Safari on iOS because you can't use anything else. So until these cats go, when these cats go, I won't need to have an iPad for the AirTags, and then I can get rid of the iPad, and then I can cleanse myself of the dirt from Cupertino.
Blame the poor kitties, why don't you?
God blame somebody.
Bill?
Not gonna take personal responsibility, am I?
Yeah, like I said, I use Fennec that is installed from F-Droid, and that's what's sitting on my bottom row that took the place of Chrome. Chrome is still buried in a folder in the apps drawer marked Google, and there is every once in a great while a use case for it, but most of the time Fennec does the job perfectly well. I even use any browser on Android gives you a good web app, the ability to make little shortcuts that show up like apps, and Fennec works really good for that too. So I mean that's. And in fact, so I guess the Samsung browser is still on here, and that actually works better for if I've got to run Video Ninja from my phone. I have to use that because it's the only thing that truly has the right permissions to access the microphone and the camera correctly for something like Video Ninja. Other blessed services, that are obviously proprietary and what have you, will work on the other browsers, but Samsung browser is the only one I have found that works well, which is a good browser. It's got a lot of functionality and it's integrated really well, but who knows what it's built on or what, anything else about it. So that's all I'm going to say about it here.
Actually, I do have Samsung Internet on my Galaxy Tab, and it works quite well because they're obviously trying to make these Galaxy Tab S series, kind of like laptop replacement. So it's a decent browser in that regard. But yeah, and apparently, and you can use it if you use Chrome. If you use your Google account, you can get it to sync. Apparently, I've not tried it out, but apparently you can use that to synchronize between that and your other instances of the browser. Because Samsung would love to have the ecosystem lock-in that Apple has for people.
Well,
Anyway,
I think
today was going to be a short show, and then it turned into this.
It turned into this. Why don't we put this puppy to bed?
Absolutely.
That'll do it for our innards this episode. And we look at vibrations from the ether.
Now,
we don't have any.
there weren't any specifically for the show, but Hank Barta, whose thing we read last time on the show, emailed me saying that he didn't hear his stuff from last time, and I believe it was Bill that read it. And I don't want Hank to think that we forgot about him or anything. So thank you for emailing us. I'm not going to read it all again. Yours was kind of a long email discussing GitHub and the things that you do there.
Went into 415.5.
Yeah, 415.5. So maybe when he emailed me, that part wasn't out yet. But I just want to make sure that we do appreciate you sending us that email, and we would love to get email from anybody else, and we will read it on the show. Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's move into check this out. We've got a couple of links listed here. No details. Why don't someone talk me about it?
Okay.
Well, I put the first one there, which is OpenSCAD, which I talked about during my biweekly wanderings. And I just wanted other people to, if they want to join me on that journey on learning a little bit about CAD, to try that out. And it does work really well on Linux.
And I put the other link, and that is a link to a video I saw today by Chris Titus Tech, where he did a distributions tier list, and it was very, very opinionated.
I didn't watch it just because of that.
Yeah. So, if anybody wants to get triggered, or anybody wants to hear controversial opinions, then it might be
Just wanted to,
Oh,
just
he
one
also
big
seems to
wash.
believe there's only 40 distros out there to rate. So,
Well, yeah, true.
I'd say
And,
maybe 10.
I mean, well, the most interesting, I mean, the TLDR, TLDW, whatever. Too long didn't watch. Of it is basically that just run Debian or Arch, and there's no point running anything else. And most distros are pointless. And there's a couple of ones which are good for new users, including Mint and Kubuntu. And that Fedora, Red Hat, Ubuntu, they're all of the devil. So
we knew
yeah,
that.
yeah. I just thought it was I do like someone with strong opinions, even if I don't agree with them. They do give a bit of character than sometimes some of the blandness that's going around sometimes. So
Okay, well,
that's why I put that in.
that about does it for Check This Out. Housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube, post at the mintcast subreddit, chat with us on Telegram and Discord, or post directly to https://mintcast.org. Our next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, July 23rd, 2023. And we have a link in the show notes to get that time converted to your time zone. Our next roundtable live stream is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, July 15th, 2023. And we have a link in the show notes to get that time converted to your time zone. Our next roundtable live stream is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time, Saturday, July 29th, 2023. And we have a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. And our live stream information is found at mintcast.org/livestream. So, wrapping up, where can we find more of you, Joe?
Well, I've had a couple of really good podcasts this last week. If you guys want to check them out, some good discussions going on over at Tilts. That's TLLTS.org. Some more really good discussions went on this last show on Friday for the Linux Lugcast, which is linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi, and link in the show notes. Moss?
Well, I do Full Circle Weekly News every week. Distro Hoppers Digest, we just had a new episode come out. You can email me at bardmoss@pm.me. I'm on Mastodon as at Zyla@hosttalks.social. And then there's my Linux website, itsmoss.com, which also features more contact information. And what about you, Bill?
Well, you can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm at wchauser3@fostodon.org on Mastodon. Also, check out my other two podcasts, Linux OTC, which we had a fantastic conversation on the last episode about the whole Red Hat getting caught red-handed. And Three Fat Truckers. Links to those are in the show notes. How about you, Majid?
So you can email me at drmajid@mintcast.org. I'm on Atypical Doctor at Twitter, although I've got to be honest, with the way the Twitter's going, that might disappear. Atypical Anesthetist on Instagram and Threads. I managed to get a Threads account. And the Atypical Anesthetist podcast on Spotify.
Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintcast possible. Bill for our audio editing. I'm sure he's going to be pulling that down from YouTube.
Oh, it's recording as we speak.
Archive.org for hosting our audio files. Hobstar for our logo, initRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for our time syncs, Bill for hosting the server which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio, and the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And Co.
I haven't had the heart to tell Majid that his video's been out for like a half an hour.
Yeah, no, I noticed that as well.
Okay.
I don't know why
I
it's
haven't had the
happened.
heart to tell you, Bill, that that microphone, while it sounded okay sometimes, most of the time it sounded like ass.
Stick to the Q2U. Well, I don't have to close Audacity
doesn't
because
look
we've
as
already
good as this,
thrown it
though.
out.
Do you,
Oh,
still
yeah.
want, do you still want the audio or not?
Nah, it ain't.
All right, fine.
It's not even worth taking up the disk space at this point.
Oh my gosh, we were at this for so long today. I know some of that was the downtime for things breaking,
Yeah.
but
That's
good
of
Lord.
almost 4 hours, man.